Good evening. Let's call to order the Truth and Taxation meeting of December 9th. Sir, would you please call the roll?
Aldrich.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
McKeon.
Here.
Peterson. Here. Tomzig.
Here.
Tucker. Here. And Bowerman.
Yes, ma'am. All right, we'll move right into a presentation of final levy. Jeff Priest is going to handle that. Jeff, you want to take it away?
I will, yeah, thank you, okay. Yeah, we are, it's our Truth and Taxation hearing, so I'll kind of run through how the final levy shakes out, and then later in the meeting, there's an agenda item where you actually approve this final levy. So it's for taxes payable in 2020, and I think so. For this levy, it's the funding, the property tax side of funding for the 2021 school year. Financing of public education in Minnesota comes from a combination of state aids, federal allocations, locally generated fees, and then of course the property taxes, which is what we're going to look at tonight. Looking at our current year budget, it's kind of a breakdown of those revenue sources. You can see state aids, grants, obviously the largest share at that 62%. And then the next largest resource of funding is the property taxes. And in our current year budget for 1920, that's at 29%. Again, property taxes are made up of board-approved levies, so it's things like the operating referendum, capital projects, building bond debt, and then some discretionary levies like the long-term facilities, maintenance, safe schools, building lease, etc. So if we look at our levy for, I guess, our proposed levy, final levy for pay 20, general fund is just over $15 million, makes up 38.21%. Community education, a little smaller at 1.54%. And then the debt service fund, the largest fund that we're living in, at $24 million and 60.25%. That makes up our total levy then of $40 million. And then comparing the levy for pay 20 with the prior year, you see the general fund actually went down. That's a decrease of $8,500. Community ed fund up 26, and then our debt service fund up 1.5. So we're going from the 38 million in last year's pay 19 levy to 40 million in the current year. And on the debt service fund, we are just following the amortization schedules for paying principal and interest on our bonded debt, and that's comprised of voter-approved levies for different building bonds that have been issued. So again, proposed levy at $40 million. And then just looking at some of the different areas that we levy in, voter approved, so within the general fund, voter approved capital projects, that's our technology levy. It's based on a rate, so we voted in a rate times our tax capacity. Tax capacity is increased, then that levy is increased. So pay 19 was 3.3 million, that goes to 3.5 for pay 20. LTFM is another one that's increasing, pay 19 amount 1.8, pay 20 proposed to 1.9, and then some of the other discretionary areas that I talked about, building lease, etc., 1.6 to 1.9. That's kind of some of the components within the general fund. I won't go through this in detail, but let's go on Jolie, right? With all the calculations. But pay 19, tax rate on the net tax capacity side, 52.93. So that's actually dropping in the current year down to 50.43. And it's made it, you can see, you start with, I think we're looking at about a 7% increase in tax capacity. There's the tax increment financing stuff that's our parcels that are taken out of there, fiscal disparities has an impact. So that rate is going from 52.93 to 50.43. And then there's the piece that, and basically the referendum, again, looking at market value up from 5.1 million in pay 19 to 5.6 in pay 20. And that calculates down to a decrease in tax rate there as well, from 11.036% to 10.228. And how that, and we'll talk about the, skip some of the tax increment finding, but here's how it looks for tax impacts. So if we look at this comparison here, assumes no increase in market value, applies those percents to various values of homes. A tax increase, decrease actually, you go to the far right, 5.18%, if there's no increase in your market value. And I look at, and I use 9% because when I look at the overall increase in tax capacity on our levy, it's up about 9%. So I assume if your home increased from, say, 250,000 in the prior year to the 272,500, here's the impacts in tax dollar increase and percent increase. So if you're at the 9% and $375,000 home last year, your taxes could increase 3.35%.
Those are annual numbers.
So annual numbers, yep, good point.
Jeff, could I ask
So,
a question on that? That's really the worst case, if there were no additional taxable properties added as well, right? Because you're taking the change.
I'm taking the total, so that, I'm taking the total market value
So you're taking-
for the district. So that's going to be some new properties, it's going to be improvements to properties that all make up that.
That 9%.
That 9%.
That's what I'm saying. Then you
Yep.
use the 9% on the existing homes. That's,
Yeah.
that would be as if, that's the worst it could be, in essence, if there were.
No, I think you could be appraised
It
and
mix it,
have.
yeah.
Yeah, you could have more than that, but I'm just
Yeah.
figuring an average here. You could run numbers for every percent.
Every parcel you need.
So, yeah. So I'm using the average, I'm taking the tax capacity on our levy is increased by that 9%.
Yep, and then applying it to the.
But
the
it'll
homes.
vary, right, depending on, it's gonna be parcel specific to your property.
Yep.
Okay, we'll get out here and what we'll ask the board to do. If you remember during the preliminary levy, we did a maximum, we didn't approve a dollar amount. For this final levy, we're gonna ask the board to approve a specific dollar amount, and it's at $40,071,272.
Questions for Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff, did we look at places where we could cut the budget?
Yeah, we certainly have. We probably have made a number of changes, and I think you'll see that play out when we get to the audit report. You see how the fund balance has increased. Specifically on the tax side, probably not. So we are levying for our allowable maximum.
Okay, so, but I guess can we be a little more specific as to where we cut the budget?
Sure. Some of the things
Why don't we hold that though for
Yeah.
maybe the audit question?
That might be more
I don't think
than-
it's germane to this.
an audit.
Okay.
It's not applicable to the levy conversation, at least I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, but I know when we discussed this earlier this year, we at least had a possible handshake agreement that we're gonna look at a combination of, maybe raising taxes, but also cutting the budget where it's possible.
Well, I'm not
Yeah.
sure what you're referring to, but I think that the budget discussion, the audit will help
Okay,
shed some light on that.
okay.
Yeah, I think you'll see some of the positive, when we get to the audit report, you'll see how fund balance has increased. Some of the things that were done to make that happen.
Other questions for Jeff? Going also turn to the audience here in a minute. Jeff, the one question I had, I might have misheard you, but back a few slides, I think it was the tax capacity you talked about. I thought I heard a 7%, and then later I heard the 9%, so I'm trying to reconcile.
And so actually the tax capacity component, actually tax capacity, let me go back to that slide. I think I'm using probably the net. So we have a levy that's based on, you calculate the net tax capacity in the district and apply certain levies to the net to the tax capacity.
Right.
And then over on the, it's pretty much the referendum on the market value side. So there then it's total market value. So if I said 6%, it actually, the tax capacity is up, so that's that 53, I think the calc I did here was about 11.3% on tax capacity.
Okay.
But when I get to market value, that's up to 9%. So that's what I used in the calc. And again, you could pick any number to do comparisons, and I kind of always take, total market value in the district is up 9%, I'm 9%. So an individual home could have been 7,
Sure.
could have been,
And without putting you on the spot, and I know Maddie's here too, and she might even remember her writing, I think the city talked about 6 point something was the value increase, but the city's boundaries are different than the school district's boundaries, so I'm assuming that accounts for the
that's
difference.
probably accounting for that.
Okay, so anyone who's watching and says, well, wait a second, I read 6 point something, for the city, and we're talking 9 in terms of the increase in value.
And our number's coming right off of our levy certification. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions, comments? We aren't taking action now, we'll do that in the actual meeting. Okay, I think at this point, we need to open this up to anyone who would care to address the board, maybe questions for Jeff. Is there anyone in the audience who would care to come forward? Okay, that's all right, not gonna belabor it. Jeff, thank you very much.
And I'll run through this again and the whole thing.
So that brings a conclusion to our Truth and Taxation meeting. I need to have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Joe, for a second. Thank you, Paul. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned, and we'll take just a couple of minutes here, free, till 15 after, and we will reconvene with our regular business meeting.
Is that a bad sign?
No, I don't think so.
No, I think you're right.
No. Yeah.
It's like, it's a peel. I don't know, it's on my eye. I can't read the numbers up there. If I can't read the numbers.
It's like,
No, but it takes me, I have like a delay.
It feels like I have like a eyeline behind it.
Yeah, I did. It was not that quick.
No, that would require me to keep, I don't think I do. Sometimes I have my contacts in. Yeah.
I've never worn them. It seemed like a lot of work.
I've been wearing them since October of 1987. When the Twins won the World Series. I just remember that's when I got my contract. So that's 32 years now.
Well, I don't need eye crutch and I'm 70.
I tell you, if there's one thing, there's two things that I could wish for: it'd be perfect eyesight and the ability to play the piano. I'm not quite sure which one I'd want more. Probably eyesight. LASIK, so I did, and they found I had the corneas are too thin. Like if they tried to go in and do the laser, it would blind me. And I'm like, man, that's not what
Yeah,
I'm
let's not do that.
Yeah, I'd rather not go
Yeah.
blind.
So yes, we know what our goals are. We're doing this right.
Some people say it, and I don't hear that.
Yeah, but
We
I
have communication, you can't talk.
Yeah. I think before.
Either one.
My dad. So that he knows, especially with a lot of people around.
It's not quite so bad if you had, but for someone who's never had hearing loss, has never had some more isolated.
We talked about it, like, no, they're going to use it for their own.
Oh, the past.
Just across. Right. Let's just, they were gonna practice, so.
All right. We're gonna get to these.
I will take your legs back, your ankles.
All right, we will call to order the business meeting of December 9th. Sarah, please call the roll.
Aldrich,
Here.
Christensen,
Here.
McKeon,
Still here.
Peterson. Here. Tomzig. Here. Tucker. Here. And Bowerman.
Yes, ma'am. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we're going to start with a couple of good news items. I'm going to actually take the first one. John, why don't you come on down? I know the price is right. So I'm going to read what they gave to me here, but I want you to tell us a little bit about the program when I'm done. So we're congratulating John Owen, who is the mountain bike team coach, on being named Minnesota High School Cycling League Coach of the Year. Outstanding. Actually, let's give him applause right now. The award recognizes a head coach whose efforts and leadership have inspired their athletes, assistant coaches, and parents to achieve their individual and team goals. This award is not about points or time, but about character and empathy, and someone who drives our athletes to succeed on or off the bike. Like that, not the job, on or off the bike. In 2015, John Oman and another rider started the Shakopee mountain bike team. He has worked in our district for 15 years. He's a technology and engineering teacher at the East Middle School, and of course, he's the head coach that we're recognizing tonight. So again, congrats, John, on this wonderful recognition. Tell us a little bit about the program. What was the inception, where you guys are at, where you see you guys going?
Yeah, so we started out in 2015, so it's been 5 seasons now. Kyle Sabota is my assistant coach. He's a city planner down at City Hall. And he and I are passionate cyclists. We love what we do, and we just love sharing it with people. So we got this idea to start this team because the league has existed here in Minnesota since 2012. So it's still a fairly young sport in Minnesota. It started in 2009 in California, so it's still young as a national sport. We're up to 31 states now, 1,900 kids in Minnesota are on bikes. I think there's something like 70 schools or so in Minnesota. So anyways, we've grown to about 60 riders here at Shakopee, grades 6 through 12. We're super proud of what we've established so far. And not just the kids, but we have parents now volunteering. We've got about 25 parents that ride with us. And we've got parents getting in shape, losing weight. It's not just the kids benefiting here. So, but yeah, it brings me a lot of joy to coach what I do and be with the people I am.
Outstanding program. Is there how big could this program be? Is there a cap on how many kids could participate?
Well, at this point, we want to continue to grow it. We do need more adults to continue to step up. At this moment, we don't have enough to go probably past 75, but we're going to continue to promote new parents that sign on to ride with us, and so we can keep growing that number even bigger than that. So yeah, some of the bigger schools are in the low 100s, like Prior Lake and Stillwater. So yeah.
Well, again, let's recognize John for his outstanding achievement. Actually, we don't have Ashley. You take a photo. Sarah, can you take a quick photo?
Yeah, I sure can. Actually, I don't have my phone with me. Oh, thanks, Mike. Perfect timing, Mike.
Someone I know used to say
And I'll try to do my best, Ashley. 1, 2, 3. What's the matter?
Breaking, I just
1,
watched them
2,
breaking
3.
away. They had a big bicycle.
Oh.
It made me just want to let it go.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So just keep it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The number of kids involved in lifelong sports.
Okay, if that impressed you, this is going to impress you as much or more. So, freshman, Emily Gerard, did I say your name right? Okay, let's practice on that. Became the first Shakopee girls swimmer to qualify for state since 2011. Again, I'm going to pause right there. Remember I said freshman, so we have 3 more years of her. That's great. Not only did she qualify for the Class 2A state meet, but she broke 2 school records in the process. Wow. She competed in the 200 IM and the 100 back stroke. At the University of Minnesota Aquatic Center, Gerard swam 2 minutes, 8.5 seconds. I got that right. Breaking her own school record to finish 3rd in her heat and 11th overall in the state. Outstanding. Congratulations. I also want to congratulate your coach, Jenny. You want to talk to us a little bit about your swimmer, the program, but I want to recognize you. Actually, we should have had you. I should have. I'm sorry. Please stand up. Both of you. I should have been talking about you when you were standing, but tell us a little bit about your swimmer and the program.
Emily has been a fun addition to the team. She was kind of our pace horse for a lot of the girls. They watched her work so hard and then watched what happens at the meets afterwards, and it made a lot of the other ones push themselves extra hard. So the whole group had a really successful season. And I'm very excited to see what will happen in the next upcoming years. And this one, yeah, my sister, the records she broke were mine and my sister's.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, and Katie and I were there watching it happen, and that was so awesome.
That's
I mean,
great.
for records to be that old, they were ready to go down, but she's going to take more of them down too.
So Emily, tell us how you think about this and kind of what your plans are in terms of your swimming career, maybe.
Well, I guess it was really fun, and I liked that they were there with me, like to watch it happen. And with my swimming career, I guess, like, I don't know where swimming's gonna take me, but I want to swim in college, and if it goes past there, then good, and if not, then that's okay.
What's your favorite event?
200 IM probably.
Okay, outstanding. Well, again, congratulations to you.
Wow. Yes, dear, you do. Thank you. I never went. Let's get you guys and then do
I can swim.
Ashley here.
Again, it's kind of the contact thing. I don't like to put my head.
1, 2, 3.
I'm just,
Thank you.
the paranoia that my God is full. I like it.
I love all water sports.
Well, congratulations to Mom and Dad, too.
Yeah.
lot of swim meets, a lot of early practices probably still to come. And you guys are welcome to stay, but I think if you look at the agenda, I'm not sure. I like to say, we're not here for a good time, we're here for a long time.
Let's all go there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, we are here for a long time. So we will resume with our regular meetings. We're on item number 6, which is consideration of the agenda as presented in the additions. Do you have any additions to the agenda tonight? Any changes? Hearing none, I will look for a motion to accept the agenda as presented. I heard Judy, Paul second. Any discussion on that topic?
Sure we can add a few more things?
I don't know if we have paper to put it on. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. We'll move to consent. Let's get it on the table, and we have a motion for consent, please.
It's moved.
Thank you, Matt. Christie, second. Any comments on consent? A lot of typical stuff. A few people in and out. Any questions, comments, discussion? Hearing none, we have consent on the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. All right. All right, folks, saddle up. Here we go. Item number 8, and we're just going to take it in order
Yep,
at this
we
point. Okay. All right. So item number 8, Jeff, you want to come on back up real quick?
Sure.
We got our monthly finance update.
Here you go.
Yeah, just our report on of the general fund, revenues and expenditures through November 30 of the current fiscal year. Just point out, I want to go down to probably the difference from prior reports is that we now have the actual audited numbers in there, so actual 6/30/19. You'll see more of this in a little bit when we present the audit. But I just want to point out unassigned fund balance from $2,069,000 at the end of 18 to up to 3.606 in the current year. And then in the current year, so FY20, we again are projecting a positive a surplus at the end of the year to again add to that fund balance if everything holds. Can look at that total fund balance going to over $6 million. So looking at I guess that results, let's go down to the expenditure side, and I'd like to talk about the salaries and wages and benefits. Represents about 80% of our budget, and when those line items, when they're in line, our projection should hold. So one of the things you can do is look at, we're at 29% as of 11/30/19 over on the blue column, that first blue column. Benefits are at 29.22, and actually kind of riding ahead of prior year numbers. So so when you kind of see that in those two areas, you're thinking things are looking pretty good for the current year. So we're still looking at, I guess we're calling this revised, but these are the preliminary budget numbers. This board will probably get some revised budget numbers in January, maybe February. And Mr. Manozzi and I have been looking at some of those numbers. I think we'll be bringing some positive budget adjustments, so we could even look better than that projected surplus of $1,195,000.
And where would those adjustments be coming from? I don't understand.
Some will be from, I guess we don't have any enrollment adjustments, just some things that, like the legislature gave us additional safe school dollars, so one-time payment. So we didn't have that in the preliminary budget. So, we're putting the preliminary budget together in probably February, March, and April. So some of those things that happen subsequent to that time get added to the budget.
And we don't know that yet, how much?
Yeah, we do. We just haven't put all of the pieces together to present to the board. So I'm just saying,
Okay.
when it's all put together, the adjustments we're going to have, we're going to look better than that, I think that $1.1 million. So
If I could even,
Is
and
it-
if you remember that Safe Schools money, that we had to wait until the end of the state's fiscal year to see if they came in with so much of a surplus to
Yeah.
what percentage we would get. And then it takes another, I can't remember when they did the calculation, that was September, October, maybe
Yeah, I
August.
think that we received the dollars probably in October.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's tough to,
I thought
it's tough
you
to
knew it
budget when, well, you didn't know if you were gonna get it or how much.
Yeah, so
So-
I think with that particular one, we left out of the budget because we didn't know what that. So then the other part of it, the other part of the budget adjustments is going through, again, if you're doing this budget in February, March, and April, and you're moving staff forward into the next year, you're taking the current staff. So if we have staff retire, staff leave for whatever reason, now we go back in and we slot in the actual staff. And so we revise those expenditures for salaries and benefits. So
Okay, thanks.
those are the things that,
Yeah.
but again, I just want to say, it looks like the adjustments we'll have will be very positive. Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to bury the lead on that. That's-
And then the other piece is, I just want to talk about the equipment. You can see that that's running quite a bit. We should call those capital expenditures, not just equipment. But in there is some of our LTFM, and specifically what's driving that is some roof work at Sweeney that's in this current year. So, again, maybe Bill will change that, say equipment, capital expenditures, it's not just equipment. That's driving that, so. Other than that, I think it looks pretty good for the current year.
Very good. Questions?
I just answered my question.
Okay. All right, thank you for the update, appreciate
You
it.
bet, yeah.
You're gonna come back in a minute, but we're gonna cover another item here in the interim. We're gonna talk about calendars. So this is actually an action item.
It is.
Okay, so Mike, you wanna take this?
Yeah, this would be the second reading of the calendars. We, again, I'm gonna thank Dale Anderson that does great work, and Sarah and other folks working on this. And we got feedback. I know the teachers did a survey of their entire group, and we've talked with cabinet and our principals groups and others. And looking at, I would ask for approval of the next 2 years of calendars, the 2021 school year and the 21-22 school year. They're very similar in how they're laid out, and there's never, everybody kind of has their own thoughts on these. And the questions we usually get are from some folks who'd like to start later and end earlier, and that's simply impossible. If you start later, you end later. If you start earlier, you end earlier. And so both of these have a post-Labor Day start, and fit the things in there and organize it well. And so unless there's questions, that's, I don't want to belabor that any
I
longer.
have one
Yeah.
question. I noticed the graduation date is not on either year. Is that normal, or is that typically?
I'm kind of looking at it, my understanding is that's normal, because you've got to reserve a space and you're going to look at the calendar to do that.
Okay.
So it's a little bit chicken or egg, because there was a chance we would have approved a calendar that was a week different. And now we'll kind of take and make that next action step and book the space on the appropriate date.
I have a further answer with that one, if you'd like that. The 2021, as you mentioned, now that you're moving towards approving the 2021, I've spoken with Stephanie Janke at the high school, and she then, once you approve the 2021, they will reach out to Grace Church, where we've held it the last number of years, to confirm that. So she wanted to wait for your motion first, your action first. And then the following year, she said that Principal Palicki and his assistant principals are working, or academy principals, are working on an actual survey, if I could step out on this limb, because the class sizes are so large. And now that we're in academies, how do kids want to graduate? Do they want to graduate together? How do parents want to see it? So They're actually looking at a survey in January, going out to both students and parents on how they'd like to see that continue.
When you're talking about the size of classes changing, is there a thought that Grace is not going to be able to accommodate? Will we
Well,
do
they're
that?
already at tickets. They're already at 4 tickets at a graduate, so they're already at tickets. So the thought is, do you want to would you, and I'm just talking off the top of my head, graduate by academy, graduate by hub, meaning the 2 academies together, move to a larger venue, which would mean moving, you know,
A distance.
a distance. But
Thank
that's
you.
going to go to parents and students. And she said, she got January.
And is that just for all high school parents, or is that
You
just
know-
for certain grades, or?
You know, I don't know if I have the answer to that. It feels as though it was 2 grades, but I'm really not sure on that. My memory is that she said that they were going to survey 2 grades, but I don't totally quote me on that one.
I would like to see them all.
It
Because
feels
the
like
big
it was at
classes
least
are,
2.
the big classes that are coming are 9 and 10.
Yep.
So if they just did 2 classes, that would not include
My,
2 big ones.
my guess is that this year's is already booked, so the
Right.
seniors, next year's will be booked as the juniors. My guess is the 2 classes are 10th and 9th grade, because they would be 10th grade.
Graduate from those years.
Yeah, but we'll make sure.
We can follow up on it.
So you need a motion to approve?
Yeah, I want to confirm there's no changes from what we saw from the first reading?
No.
Okay. Yes, I do need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Any additional comments, discussion on the calendars? We're going to be acting, you want us to take them separately, or can we do them? Okay.
I think they
So we're actually moving, the motion, I'm going to put some words in your mouth, is for both calendars. Calendar, school year 21, fiscal year 21, fiscal year 22, as we have seen, as we have copies. So with no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Now people can start to plan accordingly. All right. We'll move on to our audit. Jeff, Matt, our auditor is going to come. Bill, do you want to come on that too? I don't know if you can stay in the audience, or you can come on down. I probably should have brought you up a minute ago and I meant to. I'm sorry.
Just fine with me.
Y'all remember Bill, he'll be our new finance director, so
Hello again.
he's already jumping in, love it. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Mr.
Our
Chair.
one-year checkup appointment,
That's right.
annual. So I'll take it, turn it over to you guys to present how you want to run.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll introduce Matt Mayer with our 2019 CAFR report. So it's something we get to work on every fall. And, get these guys in and out. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for carving time out of the agenda for my presentation tonight. As Jeff indicated, the district's got a responsibility each year to prepare financial statements for the public. And our job as your auditors is to come in at year end to test, examine, and give an opinion on those financial statements. The final product of the audit is in front of you. There are 3 documents that were presented with your board documents. I've summarized them all into this PowerPoint though, so I think you can just follow along with the PowerPoint, and if you have specific questions about the documents, feel free to jump in along the way, or save your questions to the end and we'll cover those. I'd like to give you the results of the audit to begin, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of operations and your financial position to bring it full circle for you. I'm issuing 4 reports related to the audit. Our main objective is to give assurance on the numbers, and that's done through our independent auditor's report, which is unmodified this year. A clean opinion, the best we can give you, and it means that the numbers we'll be looking at do represent the 18-19 school year fairly. We also are issuing a report on internal control, which is the way you do business here at the district, your policies and procedures. We have a finding that you as board members have seen in the past regarding lack of segregation of accounting duties, a fairly common finding in a small office environment. We are issuing a 3rd report on a single audit or a federal compliance audit that we did on the federal funding that the district receives. We do that on a rotating basis, different programs each year. We had no findings for the 18-19 school year. And finally, our last report is a Minnesota legal compliance report, testing you on all the statutes that apply to school districts here in the state of Minnesota, one housekeeping finding regarding some old outstanding checks on your bank reconciliation. So I think a very clean audit for the 18-19 school year. Our thanks to Jeff and Chris and the entire team at in the finance department here. They are very helpful throughout the entire process and very responsive to all our requests throughout. With that as our basis, I'd like to provide our analysis of your operations for the year. I know you are getting good reports from your finance team, but I think sometimes getting the perspective of a third party just to confirm that and kind of match that up against what you're hearing is always good. And the more you hear it, the more I think you understand where you are financially, and you can use that as a basis as you move forward as a district. I really like to look at your results of operations in the context of the budget. As board members, your role is to direct the finances of the district through the budget process. You approve a budget at the beginning of the year, which establishes the revenue stream along with the levy, your spending parameters for the year, what you're allowing the district to spend, and a level of financial health that is represented by an increase in fund balance or a decrease in fund balance as a result of those operations. It's your job then to approve that and also to manage that throughout the year by getting reports on a regular basis to ensure that you're either on track or off track. And if you are off track significantly, to consider amendments to that budget to make sure that everyone's on the same page regarding expectations for the year. For 18-19, you approved a budget originally of about $98 million, both on the revenue side and on the spending side. And the final bottom line of that budget called for about a $1.8 million surplus. So the plan was to improve the financial health of the district by $1.8 million at the end of the year. Now, during the year, various amendments came up, various projections were modified, and the final budget called for a $639,000 surplus. So still moving the direction ahead financially, improving your financial health overall. Now, if we look at the actual results for the year, revenue was pretty much spot on. You couldn't come up much better on this particular projection. You were within 0.2%. So on a $98 million budget, you were within $156,000 of that projection, and you're actually over it. So you actually came out better than anticipated on the revenue side. When it comes to spending, spending was actually under budget, and it was under budget by nearly $1 million for the year, or about 1% on a $99 million budget. We attribute that to a conservative execution of the budget in the instructional categories, so there were savings in wages. And as Jeff talked about earlier, as you look at the 19-20 budget, newer staff replacing more experienced staff coming in at lower pay scales, and some savings we're seeing there. There was a software implementation that was postponed a year, so there were savings related to that. And there were some line items that were over budget, and those had to do with long-term facilities maintenance projects that came in over and above the original estimates. And again, that long-term facilities maintenance funding was a little bit up in the air at the time that those budgets were put together. So a little bit of an overage there is not unexpected. So actually, because spending was significantly under budget, you outperformed the plan for the year, and rather than fund balance going up about $600,000, it actually went up about $2 million, taking you from a total fund balance of $2.8 million to a final fund balance, a total fund balance of $4.8 million. And I'm going to come back to that discussion in a little bit. And I want to give you some of the pieces on where we landed. A quick look at how the funding from the state is happening right now. This is the third biennium that you've received 2% funding from the state. So we've got some consistency when it comes to state funding, and that's one piece of the equation. The other piece of the equation is the student count. And we can look at student count a couple of different ways. One is the number of residents that are actually living here, but really what we need to look at is, after weighting those for the funding formula and also factoring in the open enrollment, the actual number of pupil units that you're serving in the district. And that number actually took a small step back from 2018 to 2019. The enrollment of your residents was a little bit smaller. You had some additional losses related to open enrollment, and you did have a little bit of a gain on the non-resident side, but after everything was said and done, about 65 students or so less were served in 2018 or 2019, or pupil units actually. And that actually has been a little bit of the trend here, and that's something to be conscious of as you put budgets together going forward and kind of look at your district demographically, that the growth has started to top out a little bit, and you can see that the rate of growth has declined each of the last several years, both from a resident and from a student served standpoint. And for 2019, we actually had a decline in both of those numbers for the first time in a 4-year period here. And that's something to be conscious of moving forward, because the enrollment is such a driver when it comes to your revenue stream. And as we look at revenue from 18 to 19, there was about a $3 million increase, or about a 3.3% increase in your overall revenue stream in the general fund. And the main revenue stream you see here is state sources, which is about 80% of your budget. That number was relatively flat for the year, only up about 1.5%. That represents that 2% increase on your state money that I was talking about, along with the drop in enrollment. And as a result of that, your state funding was only up about 1.5% for the year. The big number that's jumping out at you and is the big factor in that overall 3.3% growth is the property tax levy from 18 to 19. There was about a $2 million increase in the dollars that the general fund received from that particular source from 18 to 19. But the critical point associated with that is that most of those dollars were in categorical restricted categories related to facilities and project and capital type things, capital projects, long-term facilities maintenance. So while there were additional dollars going into the general fund, they were targeted specifically for dollars that wouldn't necessarily go into the classroom or be available for operations. They were facilities related. I want you to be conscious of that. So 3.3% revenue overall growth, but again, probably closer to 1.5, 2 when it comes to the amount that was actually available for spending in the classroom. And that's another thing that we talk about here at the district annually is some of the disparities that are seen when it comes to per pupil funding here in the state of Minnesota. If we look at your per pupil funding in 2018, which is the last year that we have comparisons for, and compare that to the 7-county metro area, the Shakopee district is receiving about $1,800 less per student than the average district here in the metro area. And that's something, again, we need to be conscious of as you do your long-term planning. About 2/3 of that has to do with the property tax levy, and most of that's related to the operating referendum. That is a variable number from district to district depending on the voter-approved amount. And after we factor in the averages of the 7-county metro area and your amount here in Shakopee, it ends up being about $1,000 less per student that gets to the general fund. Now, one factor that is impactful here at the district associated with that, and you saw that earlier in the levy presentation that Jeff did, is that at least in this year, about 55% of your levy is actually going to pay debt service, the bonds on your facilities. And in the levy that's going to be approved tonight, it's up to 60%. So the taxpayers are certainly, stepping up to pay their share of the dollars here, but because you have relatively new facilities that you're still paying for, a lot of that voter-approved referendum is going to facility-type expenditures right now, and it's not going necessarily to operations. And that's one factor when it comes to this per-pupil funding in the general. And over time, you're going to spend what you bring in, and it's not surprising that there's about an $1,800 disparity here when it comes to what you're spending per pupil and what a typical district is spending. I promised to bring it full circle, and I think this is the best chart to do that. And I'm jumping ahead about 3 or 4 in your materials there. The top portion of this chart reviews the numbers that we just went over, and it shows that your fund balance increased from $2.8 million to begin the year to $4.8 million to end the year. And that's an overall number. There are various components of fund balance that we need to be conscious of, and the bottom portion of this chart breaks up that $4.8 million into the various components. And about a quarter, or 20% to 25% of that overall fund balance is actually tied up in restricted categories. These are dollars that the state mandates. It's state revenue that is designated for a particular purpose. If you don't spend it for that purpose, it needs to be carried over to next year to be spent for that purpose. So while it's part of your financial health, it's part of your cash reserves, you as a board and administration don't have discretion on how those dollars can be spent. Operating capital of almost $750,000 is the big amount for 2019. We also have some local set-asides, some other set-asides as well. And after everything is said and done, the unassigned number, which is the second line item from the bottom, is the discretionary fund balance or your scorecard number on which you base your financial health here at the district. Your fund balance policy, which is the board-approved policy related to financial health, says that you want that unassigned number to be between 8 and 12% of your annual spending or your annual budget. For 2019, that $3.6 million fund balance represents about 3.6% of your overall budget. So you are below the threshold for financial health that you as a board have established for yourselves. However, you have made significant strides in the last couple of years rebuilding the district's financial health from a low point back in 2017. The numbers in your document show this. I'll have to read these to you here. But back in 2017, that fund balance percentage was 0.7%, actually a fraction of 1%, not even a full percentage point. It went to 2.2% in 2018, and now again is up to 3.6% in 2019. So it is very clear to me, it should be very clear to you as a board and the community, that the financial health of your district is on the rebound, is improving. You still have some ways to go if that 8 to 12% fund balance policy that you've established for yourself is where you want to land. And again, as a board, if that is a goal of yours, you're going to want to hold administration accountable to a budget that continues to move you in that direction. I saw your budget plan earlier. You do have a surplus built in for the 1920 budget, so it looks to me like you would again move forward if you are able to execute that budget on that. But again, a little ways to go to get to that minimum threshold of 8% from where you landed the 18-19 school year at 3.6. To wrap things up tonight, I want to take a quick look at two other operating funds that the district has. Both of them are very healthy. The food service fund is the breakfast and lunch program. It's isolated from all the other dollars here at the district. 4 of the last 5 years, we've had surpluses in this particular fund and ended the year with about $750,000 in reserve, about a 17% fund balance. So a well-run fund and a very healthy fund to end the 18-19 school year. And finally, the Community Service Fund, which is your community education programs, ECFE, school readiness, and the like. This fund has had surpluses each of the last 4 years running, has a positive total fund balance to end 18-19, and each of the individual components of this fund have positive fund balances except one, which is community ed, and that it made significant strides moving from a deficit position of almost $180,000 last year to only a deficit of $45,000 this year. So that fund is moving in the right direction. Some corrective action has been taken in some of those underperforming community education programs. And if that trend continues, you can see you should be out of deficit here in the 1920 school year moving forward on that. So, I will leave it at that for my presentation, but I'd be happy to stay for whatever remaining questions you have regarding the results of the audit or the financial health of the district and the most recent study.
Thanks, Matt. Questions?
I have not a question, but I'm wondering if you could, just for the public that's not here seeing these slides, comment on the pie charts that talks about how much money is actually going back into the classroom.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. We look at expenditures a little bit differently than a typical financial statement here in the school district. The state, mandates that we look at your spending in 10 different categories. So you're not going to see things like salaries or repairs and maintenance or supplies. They want to look at the programmatic spending that you're doing here. And I'm just going to take you around this chart starting at 1 o'clock on the pie chart. 5% of your budget in 2019 went to administration. That's the office of the superintendent and the office of the principals at each of the buildings. District support is about 2% of your budget. That's the accountants like us, the auditors, the legal team, your HR department, kind of your back office here at the district. The instructional categories of regular instruction, vocational instruction, and special education made up about 62% of your budget for the 2019 school year. Now, I would add to that instructional support services, which is also very student-oriented. It's also staff development related. This is counselors in classroom, paras. The deans at each of the schools are in there as well. If you add that number, it ends up being about 73%, and that means about 3/4 of your dollars in the general fund are hitting the classroom in those instructional categories in the bottom portion of the chart. Pupil support is mostly transportation costs. That's about 8% of your budget, and 9% of your budget is sites and buildings, which is facilities and facilities maintenance costs.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So Matt, noticing in the pie charts that we're showing, so we went from 6% in admin last year to 5%. I'm guessing that's growth of the overall budget and holding the line on spending for building and district level admin.
I would say definitely holding the line on administration. There was one significant reclass, which we spoke about at the Finance Committee. And in the past, in general, assistant principals are required to be presented as an administrative cost. And that's a mandate from the state. You've gone from an assistant principal model to a dean model. And with the dean model, the hope is that they're going to be more involved in the classroom activities, less administrative, more curriculum oriented, and as a result, they've been classified now to instructional support. So I think it's a combination of holding administration flat and then a little bit of a reclass when it comes to the dean assistant principals.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Just following up on that, other districts that you audit, are they in that 5 to 6%? Or is it a low number or a high number?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much right in line. What I typically do is have you add administration and district support together. That's going to be administration in total. The district support is a state mandated set aside, but I would add them together. And typically I see that number anywhere from 6 to 8%. And for 19, you're at 7. Go back a year, you were at 8. So it seems to me you're falling within the averages that I typically see for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so the administration costs go down, then is the instructional support services going up then?
It is, and I think the best way to look at that's another chart here that I didn't cover specifically, but you're seeing administration here actually going down about $500,000 from 2018 to 2019. Last year in 2018, it was $5.5 million. That's the first line item on the top of this chart. Second column over from the right, down to about $5 million in 2019. Instructional support went from about 8.3 to 10.6. Now, part of it has to do with that reclassification, but you had a significant purchase of capital equipment during the year that was coded as instructional support. Your capital lease was what?
Yes,
The iPad purchase, the iPad lease that you had this year. All of that spending incurred in instructional support, so it's a one-time cost. So you're seeing at 19 kind of inflating that particular numbers.
Which is why it's appropriate to consider that category in classroom, using the iPad as an example, or the deans for that matter, but it's in classroom spending.
Exactly. So you're seeing a $2.3 million increase in instructional support. I want to make clear that reclass is not that 2.3 million. In fact, that capital lease was about 2 million of that. So about 2 million of that total was the iPad spending and instructional support there.
An actual question about the audit. Do you audit more the procedures or the numbers?
That's a good question. A little bit of both. We have a responsibility to understand your internal control processes here. So we do look at that and get that understanding of what and how you do business is kind of what we talked about there. So I would say from a percentage standpoint, I would say 15 to 20% of our audit is spent talking and understanding how you transact business here. And we actually look at things like P cards, we look at support for invoices, we look at the approval process, those type of things as part of our audit. and that again represents that fraction of the audit, but I'd say the substantial portion of our audit and our main objective is to give you assurance that these numbers are right. So I would say, again, about 80% of our time is done.
Good. I like that.
Other questions?
Yeah, the old outstanding checks, can we shed some more light on that?
Sure. And, again, I count the housekeeping item as nothing that's causing me significant alarm. There's a state statute that says that after a check is gone 3 years old and is over $100, it's considered unclaimed property. And you can research it here at the district to figure out who hasn't cashed their check, make some phone calls, and either reissue it or ask them to cash it. Or you also have the option of submitting it to the state as unclaimed property and of course the Department of Commerce. So we're just asking the district to do one of those two things, to submit it to the state or do some internal research to clear it from your records. I think we're talking probably to the tune of several $100, $800, $1,200 worth of checks that are in question.
Okay, so we're not talking
Not a huge amount.
Bill's gonna be all over.
Priority number one.
1 week.
No pressure.
Hey, Matt, since you're on that page, here's a question, perhaps for the benefit of anybody watching. So the internal control finding, I think we jokingly called it our annual finding in the Finance Committee meeting. But for the benefit of anybody who's wondering about this, can you just speak a little bit more about how common this is, what it is, maybe first, how common it is, and Bill, maybe you can chime in on what your experience has been.
What it is our evaluation, again, of kind of how you do business. And we have a pretty high threshold for you. We're looking at an ideal environment, and that means that we would get 4 touches on every single transaction that occurs here at the district. That means somebody authorizes a transaction, a second person has the custody of the asset, either the goods coming in or the checks going out. A third person is recording the transaction, is the bookkeeper for it, and a fourth person is reconciling or keeping an eye on the other 3 to make sure that those transactions came through appropriately. And in a small office environment, it's very difficult to make sure that we have a different person wearing each of those hats along the way. And multiply that by the fact that you've got a payroll process, you have a vendor payment process, you have a cash receipt process, and we run out of people in your finance department pretty quickly as a result of that. So we're understanding of that. We're not expecting this to be completely resolved. We're going to make you aware of it as board members, that it's not an ideal environment each year, but also acknowledge the mitigating controls that the district has established from a cost-benefit standpoint. And when I say cost-benefit, there are varying levels of finding when it comes to this. If I believe you're making a mistake when it comes to cost-benefit, I'm going to be more severe or more boisterous in my comments when it comes to that. Because if there is an opportunity to hire staff and the risk that's out there exceeds the salary and benefits of that staff, I think it makes sense to do that. In this instance, however, we're probably at a point where the additional cost of adding a staff person to your finance department is probably going to exceed the risk that I see out there resulting from not having that person. And as a result, you as a board need to make that decision. What level of security do we want to have when it comes to that? And I can help you on that at a high level, but it's ultimately going to be a micro decision that you and administration are going to make on an annual basis. As far as other districts getting it, it's a fairly common finding, a very common finding. In fact, 80 to 90% of districts that we work with receive some level of finding when it comes to that. I don't want to dismiss it out of hand because of that, but I want to provide that perspective.
Good context. Bill, I think in our finance committee meeting, you said something that your district has.
We would certainly be in the 90% that does receive it as well.
How close is the risk to the, benefit?
That's really a judgment call. I don't think I could quantify it for you. If it's significantly exceeding it, though, I would let you know that.
Okay.
Other questions? I have one final one. I didn't think of this in our finance committee meeting, and it's just more of a context question. The food service balance is great, and it's been growing steadily. And I'm just wondering, is that, I don't want to say excessive, how can it be excessive to have money in the bank? It's wonderful. but it seems, and I can't put my fingers on it right now, but it seems to be quite significant, and I'm wondering, is that typical? Do you see that elsewhere? Should we reapply resources?
I think you're in line with what I see anecdotally. I typically see a fund balance of anywhere from 10 to 20%, and I think I said you're at 17% or so when it comes to that. You know, the cash flow in your food service fund is fairly regular. You're seeing those dollars every 2 weeks from the state, and certainly on an everyday basis on a point of sale type situation. So, you know, a significant fund balance is not necessary in a food service environment typically. You want it to be healthy. As you look at this, I would say you're healthy, but you're not at an exorbitant fund balance level, and that might help you make some decisions on meal prices in the week as you move forward.
Okay, appreciate that. Other questions?
We need a motion to approve.
We need a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Joe.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Matt, thank you for your presentation, always insightful. I think it's appropriate to, more importantly, all due respect, to thank Jeff and his team for assisting you in this process and managing a great year, and this just reflects that. Any other comments?
And Bill, as he mentioned in the finance meeting, 0.2%, so.
Yeah,
it's
0.2
on
on revenue.
So, no pressure.
Yeah, this will be better than.
0.1%.
1%. There's room. All right, so we are at the point of accepting the audit as presented, and we've asked a number of questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Again, thank you, Matt, your team, Jeff, your team, and Bill. You'll be sitting there next year.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you. All right, where are we at? 9.2. Oh, Jeff, you can stay right
Yeah,
there.
as soon as Sarah helps me.
I thought maybe you were looking to me. Thank you. You want to just go back to your PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
You want to just go through, that's the start.
I know we're
we're
going
gonna
through
have
this,
more
this is a
to,
different meeting, so I think for
I
diligence purposes.
won't go through the whole thing. Is that okay?
Spin through it quickly.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go right to the end. How's that? So we've applied with all of the components of the truth and taxation levy certification process. So again, holding our tax hearing tonight, and the board approved the preliminary levy back in September, so we're at the point of final board action on the final levy, which needs to be a specific dollar amount. So we're asking you to approve the levy at the $40,071,272.42 for taxes payable in 20, which will fund the 2021 fiscal year.
I'd like to point out that 99% of the increase is on the debt service this year.
Right.
Which is a lot. So that's what it's going for.
And voter approved.
Right?
And voter approved.
Correct, and voter approved.
Yeah, if you look at the components, going back a few slides, but the general fund comprises 38%, and the debt service fund is 60.25, so it's pretty significant.
In case anybody's tuning in now, skip ahead. Is it the next slide that shows, yeah, this one
Yeah,
just
here's your general fund.
shows the change.
Actually,
Right. So your point, Joe, is the latter one. Right. Increases all the debt service.
And increase in.
And debt service is simply following the amortization of, paying off the bonds, principal. And
May I ask how much longer we're going to be paying on this debt?
For a long time.
Depends on the debt.
It depends on the issue. But you'll see a significant decrease next year in one of the issues there.
So, I mean, which one of the issues is going to fall off? I'm assuming it's not.
It actually won't fall off. It's just going to be a reduction in principal and interest payments on the 2015 on the bonds for the high school.
Okay. We can't just sweep this under the rug or get rid of this overnight. But
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Unless you want to donate the 40 million. Or
I'm a little short. A little short.
So, but Jeff, isn't it true though that with the debt services, as some of these tip incentives in the city for all the industry that's come in, once those start to expire, that will impact the building component? Is that, am I understanding that right? So someone will have a 10-year,
Yeah, but the only impact, that's why I ran to this slide. So tax increment will have no impact on revenue sources for the district. And the only exception to that is on the, I think I mentioned on the capital projects levy, that's set at a rate times the tax capacity. So tax capacity could be, net tax capacity could be greater when those TIF districts go away. But people think that, boy, when those TIF districts are approved, it has an impact on the tax rate, but it does not have an impact on resources for the district. Is that answering your? So there wouldn't be additional resources to
right,
make more.
right,
Yeah, it's going to have an impact on the tax rate.
right.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the suggested amount.
The 40 million levy, all right. We have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second.
We're gonna be here even longer.
Dramatic pauses.
I thought you said, if we have a second, that's why I didn't say anything.
Can we have, I will enunciate better. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Any additional questions or comments?
Yeah, can you point out where the budget was cut?
Yeah, well, in several areas, but I would say that probably the major impacts would have been, or decreases in transportation. So we reduced a number of regular routes in our system. Another big reduction was, I think Matt talked about it, was the change from having assistant principals, they became deans, so there was
But that
a
just
reduction.
That moved from one.
Well,
area
it moved
to
from one
another.
area to another, but it wasn't an actual decrease in cost. So, and a principal is going to cost more than a dean. We made some changes, staffing changes in the district finance department, reductions there. And another big one was we closed the 6th grade center. And some of those staff moved to the high school, but that again was a big reduction. So there's several line items that, varying amounts, but those are kind of the major things that happened.
And Jeff, go back to the first one on transportation. I don't want anyone thinking that we suddenly started yanking buses, and we made our decisions based upon efficiency, some contracting changes that we spearheaded, things of that nature. It wasn't like.
Yeah, I don't want to say that I don't think we reduced service at all. Service levels are the same.
Okay.
Yeah. It was just making it more efficient. A more efficient operation, for sure.
All right. We have a motion on the table to approve the levy. Any additional? Just making sure you got your question answered.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Yeah.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Jeff, before you leave, I think this is the last time. Nope, you've still got one more to go. I'm not going to recognize you yet. Bond sale. All right, we're moving on to
Bond sale.
item 9.3. So this is a follow-up to the discussion we've been having for some time. Yeah, we're going to bring forward.
Is this my last item?
It is.
Do it with gusto.
I'm going to count the Oh, sorry, Joe.
I think you know what.
I know. I met other accountants.
We're going to ask you to approve the sale of capital facilities bonds, and this just follows the board action from a month ago. The board approved an energy efficiency program, guaranteed energy savings program.
What was that again?
Guaranteed.
And saving.
Did I say guaranteed?
Savings.
Yeah, so we are doing a guaranteed savings energy program. So we issue the capital facilities bonds to fund that program. So there's no tax impact. The savings from that program will pay the interest or the principal and interest on the facilities bonds. So, any questions? I know we talked at length about the program, I think in the last
Just
couple of meetings.
refresh my
This
memory,
is,
this is basically a self-serving that.
yeah, self-funding?
Yeah.
Your savings.
Yeah. So through the savings, through the energy savings, that will make payments on the bonds.
Okay.
Yep.
So we've had this before us a couple of times. We've investigated it at different committee levels. We're at the point now where we're being asked to actually approve the bonds that will be funded in the way we just discussed. What else do we need to know? Yes, Paul?
I was just gonna make a motion that we
Better.
Second.
proceed.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Any remaining questions? Because now we're at the point of action. We talked about this. I think we all understand it pretty well.
Definitely.
Okay?
We feel like
It's great.
the safeguards are really in
Right.
there.
There you
so
go.
We're not
Yeah,
worried about
I
it.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
That's
this will be a
exactly
good
right.
program.
And guaranteed by Jeff personally.
Yeah, that.
Personal liability, is that what you're saying?
If we
All right.
can find it.
If we can find it.
All right, we have a motion, but this one we have to take roll call, if I recall.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much for
Yep.
reminding me.
Hey, I'm still here.
Okay. Aldrich,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
McKeon,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Tomzik,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
and Bowerman.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, I think let's just kind of go off record here, or off agenda for a minute. Jeff? Who's conducting business? This is your last agenda item, and I want to, I'm going to let others speak too, but you have been a tremendous asset to our district for the last couple of years. Tremendous, underscore, tremendous asset. I remember joking, I think one of our first finance committee meetings, how you came in and you found this, and I said, well, keep looking. Every time you look for something, you find another way to, whether it's transportation or something else, to improve things, make them more efficient, save us a little money. You've just done tremendous work, and our finances reflect it. The audit showed it, our monthly statements show it. We're in a better position, and while that's a lot of people, that's not just you, but you certainly have been a captain in that effort. And I thank you for that. You've been great for the district. We're sad to see you go in your position. We look forward to having Bill assume that role, but we want to recognize you for your outstanding service.
Especially you took on a tough
Yeah,
job.
you came in at a tough time. Kind of questioned your sanity at the time. There was a reason for it. So,
Did too.
yeah, so fantastic. I want to say thank you for that. Let's give Jeff a hand.
Great, and thanks for all of your support. So, and again, it was a team that, in the finance department, HR, that contribute to all of this. So, I've never seen another P card in my life.
Well, for the next, what are we, the 9th, the next 22 days, don't let the wheels come off. While you're still here. Any other comments, the board would care?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that maybe Jeff take a victory lap around here.
Good. Absolutely good.
I just want to say that the district's better off with
Yeah.
having been it for the last, not even that long.
Yeah, year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, well, in 2 years, you've made a difference. So thank you.
I really appreciate you dumbing this down enough for me to understand.
Always.
No pressure, Bill.
Jeff, you're hanging around at the end of the meeting, right?
Yeah.
That's what we thought.
Yeah.
I would echo that, and I've used this phrase before, and I think it's really apt in this situation. Our district leadership, our community, I believe we owe you an incredible debt of gratitude. You've done great work, and thank you for that.
Thanks.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. All right, now you can leave.
He's got to hang around for the next 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, we still got a ways to go, folks.
Just for the record, I need to stay up.
All right, we're going to move on to a fun topic, one that has engaged our community, and they have represented them here tonight, but they have been working very, very hard offline, and tonight is the product of their efforts. So I'm going to ask the Community Facilities Task Force to come forward. They're going to make a presentation to us tonight. And probably the first thing I'll have you do is introduce yourselves. and then we'll let you drive the bus.
First off, I am Bradley Begard. I represent staff here at the school district. I'm a technology paraeducator at Red Oak Elementary School and co-steward of the MSCA Paraeducator Union.
Tim Brophy, community member. I'm also husband to a wife in the district, and we have 2 kids in the district.
I'm Astrid Kamuller. I am one of the parent members of the community members, and I have 2 children that have gone through this district.
And I'm Kay Strand. I too am a parent in the community. I've had 2 graduate and have 1 still in the district. And we have other, I think some other task force members.
Oh,
Do you want to stand, wave?
Yeah, stand up, guys. Stand up so we can see you. Or not. There you go. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting us here tonight and to present the findings of our Community Facilities Task Force. First, we want to give you some background information that we were aware of.
There you go. Back and forth this way. This way. Yeah. This way.
Okay, so first I want to give you some background information that we were all aware of as we began this process back in May. Specifically, the District 720's 2015 referendum that enlarged the high school to include 9th grade and move 6th grade into the middle level buildings. Additionally, we were aware of the 2015 facilities plan, which included utilizing Pearson as a future elementary space if needed. The diagram on the slide on either side details Pearson's path as the district needs evolved, and this diagram came from the 2015 facilities plan. In it, Pearson transitioned from a K-5 as one of 6 elementary schools with a middle school, a junior high, and a senior high to a 6th grade center. Then transitioned to a 6th grade center with 5 elementaries, 2 junior highs, which were 7th to 9th, and a senior high, 10th to 12th. As the high school was enlarged to include 9th grade, Pearson was to return to an elementary school. However, as it turned out, it was determined that a 6th elementary was not needed given enrollment at the time. So Pearson was closed in the spring of 2018 and remains closed currently. You'll hear a little bit more about Pearson later tonight. Several of our task force members, myself included, had children attend Pearson, both as an elementary school and as a 6th grade center. So, moving on to what we were charged to do in the Community Facilities Task Force, we were to analyze pertinent information and consider what options there may be for current district facilities. We were also asked to establish a current understanding of the school district facilities, specifically, what is the maximum capacity of district buildings, what is the quantity of space available in the district, and how do we best make use of our current spaces. The task force, next slide, is made up of 6 community members, including parents, 4 teachers, 1 from each of the early childhood, elementary, middle, and high school levels. We have 3 district staff members, 3 school board members, and 1 building administrator and 1 building grounds manager. Additionally, we had representatives from Old Architects and Engineers as our facilitators. And then Dr. Mike Redman and Dave Orlowski were present at every meeting as well to help us along the process. And then we had other resources attend 1 or more meetings depending on need. The task force members attended 8 meetings over a 7-month period, beginning in May and lasting through this past November. The meetings fell into 2 categories. Meeting 1 through 5 were primarily for data gathering, and then meetings 5 through 8 were mostly around discussion. Included in the data gathering meetings were a review of current information on facilities, capacity, and enrollment, where we looked at projections and maintenance along with city development and growth. The data gathering included tours of the Early Childhood Learning Center and Pearson. At each data gathering meeting, we discussed key takeaways on the information that was gathered. The meetings where we focused on discussion, the latter meetings, we had open dialogue around space needs and goals for space standards. These discussions were developed into our findings that are presented here tonight about the space needs for the district and the goals for district space standards. And I'll pass it over to Kay.
Understanding there might be some slides in there, huh? So I think if we just arrow up and down and just kind of hold it, sliding back and forth. Does that make sense? So I don't know what, I'm not clear what's right here.
It's not mapping.
That's right.
That's what they paid me for.
So our key topics that we discussed and were charged with were enrollment, projections, capacity, and utilization of all of the district buildings, maintenance, and we did have a city planner come in and talk about projected growth in the city, but especially what relates to our school district. And we were also fortunate enough as a group to tour Central Family Center and Pearson, since those were the buildings that we were primarily focused on. The next slide shows the enrollments in the district. So the top row shows the actual enrollment numbers throughout the entire district. The bottom rows show consultants' reports and projections of enrollment numbers. And I think, again, overall as a task force, we were very impressed with these numbers and how closely they matched, because I think it must be a very, very difficult task to try to project a school district's numbers in the future. The Hazel numbers, you can see there's 4 different ones. There's a high number and a low number. The high number indicates or would show if we would have a large growth spurt in the district, or we may have in growth in construction and buildings, or it could be a large open enrollment. On the low side, that would be kind of a mass exodus of people out of the district for various reasons. But our numbers are falling pretty much right in the middle of that. So. The next slide breaks down the capacity of each of the district buildings. So you can see it by elementary, middle school, high school, and then other facilities in the district. On the right is a graph showing across the top if we were at full capacity in all of our buildings, which at this point we are really not overall as a district at full capacity. All of the buildings are operating at or under capacity right now. We looked at maintenance and have reports on how each building is as far as maintenance and how the operating systems are at each of our district buildings. This slide focuses on Central Family Center. And the reason we focus on that one is this is the oldest building in the district. It's certainly working as it is. There's nothing wrong with the building. There are a number of things that could probably be repaired in that building. It was never meant when it was built to be used for infants to be using it and people coming in and out with strollers, and certainly not for the type of technology that we're using, in a school district right now. So it could definitely use some improvements and some upgrades in various areas. But as we toured that building as well as Pearson, we were very impressed as a task force at how well our custodians are keeping these buildings maintained, again, for the age of that building, and in particular for Pearson not being open right now. We're very, very impressed with that. So kudos to our custodial staff in the district. The next slide shows the presentation that was done by our city planner that came in and spoke to us. This is showing some potential development that could be happening in Shakopee. It's a little hard, I know, kind of from a distance to see the different color coding and everything, but the majority of the development, if you drive around, you've probably seen most of it is happening right now west of the high school. There's also some potential growth that could be happening southeast of Sunpath, and then also in the kind of near Eagle Creek. While this may look like there could be a lot of growth happening, this really, I want to stress, is potential growth. In the past, the numbers, just to kind of give you a comparison, building permits were at Shakopee's peak were about 1,000 a year. This would indicate closer to like 100 a year. So while there's definitely growth happening, it's not like the growth that we've seen in the past in Shakopee, and really probably won't be quite at those numbers. So this slide talks specifically about Central Family Center. There's the picture of the building in the parking lot there. On the right is, again, small, so it's difficult to read, but that is a schedule of the building. And I think that was something that really surprised the task force, is how the building was being used, again, from infants classes there all the way to adult classes that are being held there. So utilized, in many different ways, and utilized very well. And again, for the older building, the way the classrooms were decorated for younger students to invigorate learning and to take advantage of what is there. We thought the staff is doing a great job with that. Again, it wasn't built for its current use, but they're utilizing it very well. And we have already mentioned a little bit about Pearson and how the history. And again, it was just kind of interesting, since a lot of us are familiar with Pearson and have children attend there. This goes through the start of Pearson, how it was used through the years, with its most recent use being a 6th grade center. And in fall of 2018, it was taken offline and has been closed since then. We feel that that's a good use of, or appropriate, I guess, use of it now to have it closed, because of our numbers in our elementary schools indicate we don't need it open currently. There is room in other schools for the most part. Again, just to emphasize, the building is still being maintained. Again, something that we were impressed with, and we all felt that if something were to happen in a district to another building or certain classrooms or something, some kind of disaster, Pearson could open its doors tomorrow, basically, and someone could move into it if they had to.
All right. So next we're going to go on to our finding statements, and sure. The one thing I want to stress is a lot of these finding statements, they reflect the nature of the district facilities as a whole, and not necessarily individual specific buildings unless they're specifically called out. So starting off with the high school level, as we kind of briefly discussed earlier, brand new building, beautiful building, and right now it looks to have overall capacity for the currently enrolled students for the next 5 to 10 years. And one of the things with the high school is we can a little bit better predict what we're going to have, because we have those students in the pipeline already. So our current 5th graders will be high school students in the next few years. We can watch them as they come up. Takata Learning Center here in the Shakopee Mall area, that we do see it will require some additional space to increase its capacity from 90 to 120 students, and to give it some adequate PE space, which it currently lacks. Going on to our middle level, overall, the middle level is capacity sufficient. As the school board has been discussing recently, it's more of an issue of balance. So we have too many students in West and too few students in East, and the school board is currently working on rebalancing that. And I think once we get to the point of balancing that out, things will feel a lot better for the students in those buildings. Going on to the elementary school level, again, this is an overall statement that across the district, our capacity is sufficient with the current 5 elementary buildings based on projections for the next 4 years. Right now, Jackson is slightly over capacity, and the rest of the elementaries are at or under capacity. But one thing that we do want to stress is in our research on this, we found that the number of pupils per classroom was the same whether you were in Red Oak, which is at the low end of the spectrum, or Jackson at the high end of the spectrum. Are there more bodies under one roof? Yeah, but as far as number of students in an individual classroom, they were very much the same. And then going on to early childhood, we feel that Central, while is currently being operated as an excellent program, it currently only meets the minimal qualifications of the space that our community needs for early childhood education specifically. And one thing that we need to consider as this conversation leaves the task force and goes to the school board and to the wider community is monitoring the legislative budgeting process for universal 4-year-old education programming, whether that becomes a half-day process or a full day or ever even comes to fruition. So that could very easily overnight change the needs of this community from what we currently have to a much larger space. And then we just briefly looked at the district office and support services, and the district office here. It meets the space needs of the staff here and then of the community. There's no need for additional space. The one space that we did tour in this process and look at specifically that we felt was substandard, and by that we mean not the best space that we as a community would like our district to be putting forward, and not the perfect place for our employees, was central duplicating at Central Family Center, being in a sub-level room that has issues with temperature control and water in certain portions of the year. We felt that we could do better as a community and as a district for those employees in that staffing area. And we'll turn it over.
So you heard about our charter, the process we went about to collect information, certainly the findings along the way, a lot of information to digest over a relatively short period of time. The statements here reflect the potential of our facilities and what we wanted to do to align with the potential programs now and in the future. I think we've already mentioned a few times that our building administration staff and ground staff are to be commended. In general, we have a high standard that we've set here in Shakopee. We're fortunate to have many new facilities, quality learning programs, learning environments. The buildings have had and should continue to have continued ongoing investments so that we can serve our community well. These investments should be evaluated periodically to make sure that we are staying consistent. We will also continue to monitor enrollment, rebalance as is necessary, as we've just done with the middle schools. That's something we should see on top of. The long-term projections, right now we have numbers through 2023. To look another 5 years out, we should do another assessment. We mentioned the potential for development, future housing, and it's also worth mentioning that the housing doesn't necessarily translate to students entering the district, depending on the use of that. Some could be empty nesters coming in, some could be singles or newlyweds without kids. So there's still some analysis that needs to be done in that space. And then an example, we partnered with the city of Shakopee, the city planner, to continue that monitoring process. The high school. We're confident to say that the high school will likely serve us for many years to come.
Better.
One of the areas we did look at, though, with the academy model, there have been some nuances. We thought my daughter would be in the science engineering, but she's arts and entertainment, or arts and communication. So that academy in and of itself is actually, I think, exceeding expectations. But to look at some of those programs within the high school, just to make sure that we're level setting those. It's kind of benefits from not being located in the high school setting, and what we're really saying is co-located. They do well kind of in their own space. They would benefit from more appropriate physical education space. Middle school, they would benefit from rebalancing. Again, that's already work in flight. We do generally believe that the footprints of these schools, and they have their own characteristics, that's actually embraced by the communities in which they're in. It is true to say that there aren't necessarily equivalent, say, performance space, so West benefits from that, but we also know that East potentially has better shop space. Some of that, to the latter, will be mitigated as that rebalancing activity takes place. It should reduce some of the stresses on some of those other areas. But in general, they're widely accepted for what they are. Early childhood, given its age, CFC is in very good condition. However, we feel it's not functionally well suited for the early childhood programming that's actually taking place there. Some characteristics of what ideal space might look like: fewer stairs, fewer levels, larger classrooms, as in square footage, not more kids in a classroom, but in fact more space to move around. Easier access to sinks and bathrooms, ample outdoor green space that include playground space, and on-site parking. So the current facility would benefit from functional improvements to improve that space. And one thing we did note, given its current geography, CFC doesn't really have a lot of room to grow out. It's essentially landlocked quarters. And last but not least, Pearson. Not coincidentally, so we said that it's indeed not open as an elementary, at least based on our projections for the next 4 years. We said this unanimously as a task force, that it should be considered for use by different programming. What that programming is would be subject to another study, so it's not the purview of this group to say it should be used for early childhood versus moving office space versus Takata. But in fact, it's a great asset and it should be leveraged. Any future expenditures should be done so in a fiscally responsible manner, and that's consistent with takes place and has taken place within our capital budget. And I think the last is a thank you. And we obviously have some other task force members as well, but it is an honor to be part of the task force. We'd open up for questions.
Let me begin by, on behalf of the board, thanking each one of you. You also took on the task of presenting tonight, which I don't know how the short straws happened.
I think everybody took a step back and just forward looking the other way.
There was a few of us that were on a task force many years ago, and we kind of relate to it. But thank you, with all sincerity, to you four for presenting tonight, to the entire group. And I'm actually going to read, I'm going to do the first names, but I want those folks to be recognized, the entire committee. So Richard, Aaron, Brian, Dan, Tim, Allison, Kay, Bradley, Kevin, TJ, Corinne, Natalie, Ed, Katie, and Astrid. I'm actually going to take a second, and I want to thank you guys. When we commissioned this group some time ago, there's always the thought, are people going to come forward? What's the attendance going to be like? What's the outcome going to be? And I can tell you that the facilities committee, who sat in your meetings routinely, came back and just gushed about how you guys showed up, engaged, lots of good questions. They learned a lot in the process. Hopefully you did too. Sounds like you did. But we want to thank you for being participatory community members, if I can say it that way. That's what we need, and we really appreciate that. So first, thank you to the entire committee. I want to thank Ben in the back too, because you guys were steered by Wold, and they do a tremendous job. They've done this for us in the past, and I really think that they should be commended for what they do, because they helped us greatly. So thank you. Now with that, what comments, questions does the rest of the board have at this point? I've got a few, so somebody else chime in.
I have a curiosity. I once was on the task force myself. I'm wondering if there's any aha moments you had while being on the task force, or something that maybe surprised you.
I think for me it was really as we were touring and the conditions in the two locations that we toured. That was really an aha moment, because not having seen one of those buildings before, to see what fantastic care we did was really amazing.
I would just kind of echo that too. I think I had been in that kind of dungeon of central duplicating many years ago, but I had not been in the rest of that building, and I was impressed with with the fun atmosphere of that building, and also some really unique characteristics. I don't know if it's been in there, but that gym is just beautiful. It's just like very old school. Looks very kind of vintage looking, and so to see an asset in the district like that was just kind of fun.
I still miss the old order. Very much, I miss
The mural.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
being used, every inch of space of that building is being
Good.
used, and that was a surprise to
And
me.
I see Julie in the audience as well, so she is certainly to be commended for her leadership in making the most of that space. And I will be transparent, I didn't know that we had a feeder system, you know, with the 6 elementaries going into what was then the junior highs, and what the nuance that created having to do with balancing and the like. So I think there was some learnings just in terms of, you know, how are we funneling from elementary into that middle level. I don't know that I was the only one.
No, you weren't.
Surprised, but.
And I have to say my aha moment was actually seeing the data as far as the actual student population in each building. As a tech para, I get the opportunity to go and visit other buildings, and it's usually a dash in, dash out type of situation. And being at Red Oak, I'm in the building that has the most number of empty classrooms, and I occasionally go over and help out my colleague at Jackson. And you can sense that there's more kids in Jackson than there are in Red Oak, but to actually see the data behind it and that they are ratio teachers to students in that building was comforting to know that they were equal as far as that. Do we have more space in one and less in the other? Sure, but it was actually to see that data and dispel some myths and rumors that I've been hearing and I think some preconceived notions that people have.
Thank you. Thanks again for your service.
Other comments, questions? All right, I'll toss one out. Kay, I think it was when you were presenting, I'm not sure who had this section, but on the early childhood level, your kind of the red highlight was current quantity of space minimally meets childhood needs. And maybe I've answered my own question. I was going to try to clarify when you say minimally meets the needs. Is it space? Is it capacity? Is it facilities? Is it programming? What was it you guys kind of thought we were missing or could seek to improve around that space?
I think it has to do with the slide that Tim covered that has where the ideal situation. So for instance, this is a building where you have primarily young people coming in, and so you've got the young kids coming in who need hand holding and they have to be brought in by parent, grandparent, and adult. You've got people coming in with strollers. So it's a very difficult building to maneuver. Security and checkpoints and getting the visual lines and everything of the building are difficult. The parking is not ideal there for, again, unloading kids and strollers and everything that you know, instead of just being able to drive up and drop somebody off. Again, ideal situation with young, early childhood would be sinks, ideally bathrooms, you know, right in each of the rooms for the younger kids.
Just to play and not having people walking through as they're playing in that space.
And the outdoor space, the playground, you know, I'm sure everyone, if you haven't been in the building, you've seen the kind of lack of playground that just is kind of plopped into a parking lot.
With the early childhood special education also being in that building, having one centrally located elevator that's kind of tucked into a corner that was added in a renovation years ago. Not really conducive for the students that are in wheelchairs or need mobility assistance that can't go up and down stairs. So that presents additional challenges with, you know, minimally meeting the needs of the community in that regard.
And when we looked at the square footage per classroom, it's slightly below, and there isn't necessarily a requirement from a parent's perspective, but it's slightly below what would be considered ideal.
900?
I think it was did we have was it 900 square feet?
Yeah, about 920 to 940 square feet for a early childhood classroom minimally, and I think we're at.
It was something in the yes.
Yeah. That's where we're at CFC.
So certainly making it work, but you're in a compressed space.
Okay.
A lot of activity going on in a relatively finite footprint.
Thank you.
I also believe there was something to do with the stairs and the age of some of the students going up and down the stairs. There is it the fire marshal or, I don't know.
Yeah, it was for fire safety that students, I believe it was the 3 and infants, needed to be on a grade egress. So that hinders their ability to place classrooms, because then you have to have considerations of putting specific classrooms on specific levels. So you can only do so much in that configuration.
And we looked at some similar districts and their young child programs, and they were, some of them quite a bit bigger, somewhat bigger than ours. And I think it's an advantage for our community, for our parents, if we could increase that. And I think it's an advantage for our school district in a lot of different ways. Even just the idea, starting there, maybe that's more likely they're going to continue K-12 through the system as well. So I think, you know, if we had more actual space.
Are you talking for capacity?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, if we were going to increase that, if that were possible, I think that could be a bonus for our community.
I'll make a comment on the stairs thing as a parent with the babies that started at 2 weeks at Central Family Center, going up and down stairs, the car seat, and big old bag, and you know, your first time mom, so you have everything. Come across another first time mom going the opposite direction, it's not very easy to get down, so. Comment up upstairs.
Other questions? All right, I'll throw another one out. Kim, I think this was at the end, it's one of the guiding statements. You made the comment that Pearson should be considered, you all, that Pearson should be considered for use by different programming. Without trying to put words in your mouths or try to get you to say something you didn't mean to say, are you, as a group, recommending to the board that a formal study or formal steps be taken? You're saying it should be considered, but I'm looking, what's the action you would say? I realize that we have to make that decision, but what's the action you think we ought to do about that?
Yeah, another evaluation in terms of the use of the space. One, make sure that there's no ahas that we didn't anticipate. I believe a fire panel had to be replaced, or some incidental costs that need to be incurred. And then ultimately, what program? You know, we could make a case, oh, we've said it's a single level, there's sinks in pretty much every classroom, the classroom sizes would be more conducive for early childhood. But looking at the slide of all that programming that's taking place, do you move some? Do you move all? We mentioned Takata Learning Center would benefit from more fight space. So there's a separate evaluation in terms of what that programming might look like. If you ask my opinion, low-hanging fruit suggests that the early childhood could move in there, but that's a separate evaluation that I think another study would be warranted for that.
Agreed.
Another thing that I would like us as a board to consider is maybe taking some of this unused space and maybe starting up our own transition program.
So back to the question on Pearson, you can only look out so far, and then you look at a lot of data, and I remember if it's anything like what we did, you kind of get, you know, just dated to death. But I think you talked about, in fact, the bullet says it, you know, for the next 4 years. So recognizing you can only see so far forward, and without knowing, but seeing growth coming to Shakopee, development coming to Shakopee, what I still hear you saying is we need to look at how to use Pearson, even though we really can't see beyond 4 years, and maybe we need an elementary again in 4 years. I hear you saying, yeah, we understand that, but you should consider how to use Pearson now, in essence. Is that?
That's a fair statement. And I think another interesting, it's part of the analysis, and in a couple years, we're probably going to fall into this. As a senior graduates, you need another kindergarten starting, in effect, to keep the status quo. And so, if we go back to, you know, when we were 1,000 permits, special guest, 1,000 building permits, and the rate at which Shakopee is growing. In fact, I recall we moved in 2001 to 2005, the city almost doubled in size, right? So you can see pretty quickly why, you know, the number of elementaries grew at that rate. But I guess cautiously, as you look at, you know, empty nesters who, you know, and certainly my development, it's not as though parents are packing up and moving to Florida. So even though you still have the population, you don't necessarily have the enrollment impacting your numbers. So what's, you know, red line, we kind of looked at what the total district can accommodate. We don't have a crystal ball. Would you potentially need another elementary 7 years from now? Another study would warrant in making that judgment. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, there isn't a conclusive, oops, we should have kept Pearson vacant for 7 more years, and then we're ready. So perhaps another study on what projections look like till 2030. I don't know what the appetite is for looking at it from that lens. But that would certainly help bring some more confidence to use of that space more immediately.
And to kind of piggyback on what Tim is saying, I think what we're really suggesting is taking a look at Houston as is an elementary school perhaps the best use of that space? I mean, if we're really looking at it full package, you have both Central Family Center and Pearson. Is what's at Central Family Center good there, or would it be better at Pearson, or is there another program that would be better? Either way, if you start moving things around, you run the possibility of still having an empty building that could still function as an elementary center. So that's, I think we're in a excellent position to be able to really stand back and look at the larger view of, is Central Family Center where we want to put 4-year-olds like this one here?
Yeah, I was just.
Other questions or comments?
Well, not really a question, just like Christy and Judy, I was fortunate to be part of the group and along with, and it was fantastic to see, like you all said, the love that the buildings are getting, whether they're open or closed. Central Family was, the staff is bending over backwards to work through the limitations and make it so that the kids feel loved and it's a positive environment. Central Duke was eye-opening for us. Who knew that having copiers and printers in a place that sometimes has water in it is a bad idea, along with no loading docks, so they can't bring pallets of paper and they have to manually carry case after case after case up and down steps, and you sign me up. Yeah, I mean, instead of having a pallet jack bring in pallet after pallet, it's case after case, and it's our staff is now doing more work, more physical labor, and I believe we're not able to. It was some of the pricing, we're not able to buy in bulk because we can't transport in bulk. So it's, wow, our space is truly limiting our own efficiency. Sure. So, and that applies academically as well, as it was articulated. I want to wrap up my statements by saying, a fantastic group, very passionate, very knowledgeable, very analytical. Just a great group to be able to sit in with. And our special guest participant in one or two meetings too.
Yeah, kept us on track.
Yeah.
We should have her name.
She provided the comic relief.
Well, again, we thank you very much. We thank you for taking the time. We sat through a lot tonight to wait to this point, but we appreciate it. Excellent report. As a board, we need to take it, digest it, consider it. What are the next steps that we do from it? And won't make any promises in terms of the timing or how we move ahead, but you've given us what we asked for, which is a lot of information to consider to help the district continue and to hopefully improve in ways that we all want to see. So thank you again very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're all welcome to stick around. We probably have no more than 2 more hours for this.
We're getting close to the halfway point. Close.
All right, where are we at? You guys doing okay? We need to just keep rolling. If you need something, you can get up and go.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
group kind of turn over.
Sure. Maybe I'll wait till the crowd. Anybody else need a water while I'm gonna get some steps in? You know, 6 hours usually sufficient. What's that?
Keep forgetting that.
I'm thinking these guys are like, the horse in the barn, they're ready to get out of here, because I need to call them up, they're already up here.
Well, they know what's
I know. We're gonna move on to item 9.5, so this is an informational presentation for the board. 2021 summary of our course and program proposals. We did get something, so we've had a chance to look at that. Thank you for that. We got a whole crew here, so we'll just let you guys take it away.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. So this is our annual update that we do with the board in discussion about changes that we are proposing in academic programs or in specific courses for the 2021 school year. So we generally always just kind of remind you of process. We usually, how we do this is we work with our teacher articulation teams or curriculum teams throughout the fall. We put proposals together. Sometimes they're grade level or elementary level program changes, or they're specific course changes at the secondary level. So our teachers help us put that together. We review it with admin. We review it with our district advisory council, which we had last week. And then we bring that information to you as well. And then in January, the first meeting in January, usually vote to approve that. So who I have with me tonight, I'm going to just let them introduce themselves, starting with Zach.
I'm Zach Idlebest, Teaching and Learning and CAPS Coordinator.
I'm Erin Highland, High Potential and Innovative Programs Coordinator.
And I'm Nikki Summer, Teaching and Learning Supervisor.
And so we're just going to dive in and start with talking about what will be an upcoming adoption in science and specifically at the elementary level.
All right, so last summer, MDE, the state of Minnesota, officially adopted new science standards. And what's super exciting about that is Shakopee was anticipating this big shift in science education for the past few years. And so we have been working to understand those shifts, which really basically move us from more of an inquiry-based approach to a phenomena-based approach. Very hands-on, a lot of doing of science. So we are working with our K-5 articulation group to align those standards, and we're looking at resource selection and purchasing for next school year so that we're ready for full implementation in that 21-22 school year at elementary K-5.
And I'm here to speak about art. So in a reflection again on some new updated standards for the Minnesota Department of Ed for all the arts, including fine arts, visual arts, performing arts, we were focusing on creating a better alignment from our elementary programming to all of the amazing things happening in our secondary and academy work that we were doing at the high school. So this year we are fully implementing new standards for 4th and 5th grade. And this is actually an example of a 5th grader's artwork. And it's new categories in arts. So they look at create, present, respond, and connect. So again, not only having students do art, but also really responding to the art and connecting to what they see in the world and around them. The really neat thing I think one of our principals did to kind of sum up art now and the new focus is that when you walk down an elementary hallway, you might not see all the exact same cookie cutter projects any longer. It's really giving students more voice and choice, and we're teaching them more multimedia and different ways of creating art. So we're teaching students metalworking and fiber arts, in addition to the traditional modalities that you were probably used to that we experienced in elementary school. So students are getting a lot more voice and choice and exposure to different ways to create art. So we are looking towards rolling out 2nd and 3rd grade next year.
And this, to me, I had to remind myself of this because it kind of does blow one's mind, but this is the 6th year of working on electives alignments to the Academy of Shakopee, grades 6 through 12. And it actually will be the last year that we will meet by Academy team because we are almost 100% complete, except for maybe some tweaking going into future years, which will probably be more by program of study. But it's been 6 years when we put these next level of courses in. It'll be the 7th. One of the things you'd hoped to do, but high school had conferences tonight, but we'll be doing it on January 6th.
is we went through all our records over the last 6 years, and we've discovered there's a handful of teachers, some that were at the middle level, some at the high school, that actually stayed on the teams all 6 years and moving into 7. And so you'll get a chance to recognize them at the first January meeting.
Good.
If you look at the programs to study, which you also had as a handout, it's the, we always do a little tweaking every year, so that's no surprise. For the 6 career academies, we're getting very close to, well, I know our board members who have been here for a while, you'll see very little blue. If you remember, blue was a dominant color at one time.
There's a lot of inspiration on there.
There's a lot of blue. And I think actually there might only be one academy that has blue at this point. So a big focus of this year is those advanced capstone courses, which we'll talk about briefly. But if you, just to kind of help you remember, each career academy has 4 programs of study with an intro, an intermediate, and advanced course, and then aligned electives from the middle level. And so a lot of the work that we did this year was really focusing on those advanced courses. We also made a small adjustment to one of our middle school electives as well. And if you notice the second handout we sent you, you would see a graph at the first page of that shows what are the new courses that are listed there, as well as you'll see an asterisk by the new courses on our instructional framework as well. And so we did move to Saber animation and video, and dropped a course that wasn't feeling very well at the middle level, digital storytelling. So those are the updated grids. Just a very brief, and I know this is hard to read, so I'm just giving you the 10,000-foot view, but keep in mind that the majority of these classes are the advanced courses now. This is what we've been working toward for a number of years. So they're capstone courses. They are the culmination of those pathways or those programs of study. We have worked hard with our teachers the last 2 years to sort of identify what we think the student experience should be. That students should have a lot of voice and choice, that it will be working with external partners in the community. We think these courses will be some of the faces of the academy in terms of our partnering with the community. Lots of different experiences. If you read the course descriptions, if you had a chance, you kind of tell the ones that were the capstone or advanced courses, because very project-based driven or immersion driven, or internships were mentioned, or partnering with experts in the field, those kinds of things. So we really think we'll see our kids continue to do amazing work, especially with that culminating experience that they'll have in their junior or senior year. Keep in mind, it's sophomores going into their junior year next year that will be required to complete a program of study. So we're finally at the point where we're seeing that graduation requirement start to take shape. Just a really cool thing, because we've been working on it too. We also have been working on the TLC pathway called Next Steps Pathway. And so we are currently in the midst of doing, the TLC seminar is up and running, and Adulting 101 is going to be taught for the first time second semester. Still have work to do to figure out Adulting 201 and Next Step Capstone, but we're excited about it because we think it's really going to focus our TLC kids on really, again, trying to have that seamless transition. We've had some preliminary conversations with Scott County about helping us with that, making sure kids have a really strong plan of what they're going to do after graduation, and everything that leads up to that capstone experience is getting them ready to try to do that either community partnership or have some type of work experience that's going to help them feel like they know what they're going to do after they graduate from the TLC. So they're just fun to work with, I'm just going to tell you. That's a good, fun group.
And as we move to the academy model, in addition to that 3-course program of study being a graduation requirement, we have freshman seminar that's already running as a graduation requirement, and we're going to be offering financial literacy as a graduation requirement starting next year for the class of 2022 and beyond. So really just a course to give everybody a jump start, leaving high school with some knowledge of of how to budget and manage your money, leaving us here in Shakopee. Another thing we're really excited about is our CAPS program, so our Center for Advanced Professional Studies. We have 3 programs currently. We're looking to add one in engineering and manufacturing. And the way that that course runs is first semester, our students are immersed at a host site, being able to just get some hands-on experience, and it's awesome the experiences they're getting at all of our programs. Currently, there will also be concurrent enrollment with a community or technical college in all of our programs. So we are hoping that we can continue to work with Bayer as our host site, and they've been willing to sign on and say that they're ready to go for this engineering and manufacturing program. We think it's a really good fit because they have everything from the engineering side, also the manufacturing floor. So students will be able to see things kind of come full circle in one location with that program. And the last thing we wanted to highlight was some of the new world language electives for next year. We'll be offering Japanese 4. That's going to allow students to be able to take Japanese throughout their entire high school career, and also advanced Spanish for careers. We have some students that are able to finish up all of our current Spanish offerings by their junior year. So this would be an opportunity to continue with the language. It would also be a non-CIS option for students if they had wanted to go into this advanced class instead of taking some of our CIS Spanish options. Any questions?
Not a question, but a comment. As I said last week at the meeting, these classes that they're coming up with makes me want to kind of go back to high school because they're just so cool. So great job. Just they sound like very great class. Just great.
And were you done? Sorry.
I'm done. Go ahead.
Sorry. To that end, 2 comments. Number 1, it's great to see so many new classes, a greater number of new classes, and a very small number of retiring classes, right? So we're expanding opportunities, to Joe's point. And as Nancy said, less blue, right? There was a lot of blue there a couple of years ago. One of the classes that I think is just fantastic, they all look great, but one that when we started the academies, there was a concern of the career pathways available to the arts and communications, that there aren't a lot of professional careers on paper. And so I love this creative professional class. Really talking about you can have a career, you can be creative. I think that's been a link that's been missing, or something that we're really enhancing. So kudos to whoever was involved in designing that. I think it's a great way to show the creative kids and the artistic kids that they can have a good career path in an area of passion.
I participated in a panel at the high school a couple of weeks ago, and after the kids were done asking questions of the adults who were there, I asked them a lot of questions. And I was wowed by their response about what they think they're getting, the value they think they're getting from their high school education. And I know they might have been, polishing it up a bit for a school board member visiting there. But I also know that there are a lot of high school, and I must have talked to 50 kids or more. There are a lot of high school students who would also see that as a challenge. They'd want me to know exactly what was going on, and it was just very, very positive. And the 2 things that really made me feel appreciative of the work that you do, one of them was they all loved the 4-period day. They loved the 4-period day, and I know there was a lot of anxiety about that, so I loved that. The other thing is how much, without any prompting, I was just asking about their classes, without any prompting, I think every student said, my teachers are there to help me and support me. And I think when you have a lecture class, you don't get that warm fuzzy from your teacher. I'm there to help you and support you. So I just was so grateful for what you're doing and what you've created for our students in Shakopee.
It's amazing to see on some of the Twitter feeds from the different academies what the students are experiencing. One of them that just kind of blew me away was students at St. Francis that were learning how to, I think it was stitch a heart shut or something like that. And
Something minor.
Whoa. They're doing what? So, I mean, that's just amazing that a high school student's getting that opportunity at that age. It's something, a career that they may be passionate about. And that probably help them determine if they're really passionate about it or not. So it's great. I mean, that's just one example of the many things that I see, and I'm just extremely excited for every student that gets to have that experience, because I know I didn't.
It's a little pedestrian compared to cardiac surgery, but I can't tell you, Nancy will know this. She knows where I'm going.
I know where you're going.
Some of us know as well.
I'm so thrilled that financial literacy is off and running. I don't think we can't overstate how important that is in our current day and age, and we see it in our workday lives, our neighbors, our families. There's just so many things about finance that just aren't getting communicated anymore, and I think we're dealing with those issues. So this won't solve everything, but doggone it, we're going to take a stab at it, and I think our kids and their futures are going to be better because of it. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that as a district we're supporting it. I'm thrilled that we're not only supporting it, we're mandating it. And I think it's going to prove itself out over time. I really do. And I commend Nancy for living this and seeing it come to fruition, and everybody who's making it work. And I really think that it's a wonderful thing amongst all the other wonderful things. I really think it's a significant step. Like I said, it's not cardiac surgery, but it's something we all can use. So I applaud that. Thank you for that. Other comments?
Just one last comment from me. I've long since believed in the concept of the academies, and I always thought it was a better mousetrap, right? We built a better mousetrap. And it's been a concept. It's been out there in the abstract, and now it's coming real. My daughter's picking her academy this week, right? So it's not just real here, it's real at home, and so it's just amazing to see all the options that the kids have. And I'm convinced that we've got the right framework to move forward with. So thank you for all that you all have done, and as you said, hundreds of others have contributed.
Yeah.
But just want to say thank you to everybody.
Please take that thanks back. Thank everybody else. Please touch this, please, because we know it's a lot of people.
Yeah,
We do appreciate it.
it is a lot of people.
At the outset, I was quite a bit more recalcitrant than Matt was about the academies model, but as I'm seeing it come into fruition, I am excited to see where it goes. So you turned one opinion around.
Well, thank you very much. So you'll be back in January looking for actual approval. Then I just.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you'll have action on this.
And then if I could just make a final note, this is for Reggie. I just want to personally thank Reggie for his time on the board. I made a long list to it last year, at this time, of our other board members who were leaving us. So I know we're taking time, but I want to share just a quick story. I had only been on the board, or I shouldn't say on the board, I'd only been in the district for 3 months when I went to Reggie and some board members to see if they would go to Kansas City to see a program called CAPS that I had been obsessed with for over 5 years. And Reggie was willing to go down and see that program. And, sometimes I think we forget, because it's so clear how important our teachers are and our staff to making these things happen. But it also shows how important our board members are too, because here we are tonight adding our 4th CAPS program because board members saw that program, could see how it could transform lives for kids, and adding financial literacy. And it just shows you just never know the impact that you have. Just 2 weeks ago, I was having some electrical work being done in my home, and the electrician looked at me and said, "I know who you are," and I didn't know who he was, and I explained. Sometimes I'm nervous. I say, "Oh, yeah, the director," and he goes, "My 2 kids both went into the CAPS program, and it changed their lives. It changed their direction of where they were going to college, and it was an amazing program for them to experience. And it's people like Reggie and others who have helped to make that happen. So thank you for making a difference in the lives of our kids, Reggie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had to take him to Kansas City where he's not moving.
I did.
I mean,
I don't know if that's that's why he's so
Barbecue
easily
has nothing to do with
accepted.
that.
Barbecue might have been thrown out, but he didn't have to, and he did. And I had been trying to convince people for about 5 years in another district, so it was wonderful to come here and get a different response.
I was about to say you were able to convince him to go to Kansas City.
The New Caps course with an international company, I think that's really
Yeah.
exciting. I think
Awesome.
that's gonna add another level of
Yes.
sophistication to their understanding of how the world works, how
Well,
business
what's
works.
wonderful about Bear is they're unusual in the sense that they have they have an engineering department as well as they can take all design ideas all the way to implementation. So it's sometimes hard to find that, to have both engineers and then the whole lean manufacturing piece is there
Yeah.
too, so fully integrated.
That's gonna
so.
be a great program.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
You bet.
All right, let's move on to item 9.6. Dave is going to tee up again, this time with consideration for action tonight, if we feel like we're ready, to discuss and talk about middle school attendance areas.
Okay, so a lot of this information you will have seen before, but I'm going to just
I'm sorry, okay.
recap some old info and then see where we landed finally with a recommendation. Okay? Our current reality, this was an aha for somebody that we have been using a feeder model. We have this large difference between our middle schools and their size, and we know that creates challenges. We had a timeline for this project, and we're now down toward the bottom of this, where December 9th was our target date for making this decision with a little bit of wiggle room. We communicated lots of different ways, and there's a summary on these slides of different ways that we put this information out there. You can see that all the way up until even last week, and then ongoing where we had people taking calls, emails, whatever, responding to people in person as well. Additionally, with our current reality, this shows our current elementary attendance areas with overlaid with the middle school attendance areas. And one of the things we've talked about is that 3 schools basically feeding West Middle School and 2 schools basically feeding East. And you can really see that on here with Red Oak and Sunpath basically primarily feeding East. And you can see the other 3 feeding West. This is just a cleaner version of the current middle school areas. Scenarios, we went with board criteria, and we looked at all these things as we put possibilities together and then kind of analyzed them. And then Mike and I, after listening to all the input, analyzing them ourselves through our discussions over time, on the 2 finalists, we believed 106 made the most sense, although they were both viable. And that we also, along with this, have we've talked about this as well, what our plan would be for inter-district transfers, and we'll go through that here again in a minute.
If I could just interject, there was a lot of feedback, and I think we've shared this with you, that every time we came back and ran that and put it into a different scenario and looked at it, and with the thought being, hey, we're really open to suggestions to improve that, and still after all of that, kept coming back to 106 and go, yeah, this appears to meet the criteria the best. And
yeah, and you saw that a couple meetings ago where we brought a scenario that was talked a lot about at one of the public sessions, and then discussions related to inter-district transfer versus kind of a phased approach by grade, and we looked at what those numbers would do as well. So we did, we responded to that, and this is still where we landed. Okay, so let's take a look at that. This is 106. Here are the statistics that go with that. You see they open much closer in size than they are, and then if the developments that are in each of those areas were fully built out, with our projected ratios of how many kids that would generate, what that would do. And then you see what the demographic projection would be on those two scenarios as well. It's not really a projection, it's based on the 877 kids at East and the 947 at West. Okay? You see what happens over time, and what we really looked at here was to see, would this change keep the two schools at a similar size? And if we just roll forward the kids that are in the seats, we start out at that 70 difference, and then it slowly goes down in the two schools, again, assuming no kids in, wind up kind of flip-flopping in size, but stay very close throughout that whole time frame. For inter-district transfers, we tried to listen to the feedback and put in a plan that responded to the change that we would be making for 8th graders specifically after having 2 years in one middle school and then being switched at the end of their middle school experience. So what we're trying to do for the 1 year is give 8th graders a preference and expand how different we would allow the schools to be net after we take requests to switch between the two schools. Okay? We also looked at trying to do this in a way that allowed our open houses and our staffing and all our behind-the-scenes tech happen in a timely way, so we put a deadline in there. And we talked about, not necessarily, it could be a shuttle, it could be you stay on your bus and you get driven over to that other school, but providing some way of transport between your attendance area school and your prior school, if that's what you choose to do. Okay?
Dave, if I could add, yeah, I think ultimately the balance is we acknowledge there's a concern in terms of the balance between the two schools and enrollment, and we've gone through a lot of work to rebalance that or put that balance back in order. So that's one interest, is having good enrollment balance between the two schools, and then tried to be cognizant of the fact that, yeah, you're going to be an 8th grader next year, you've been in one of these schools for 2 years, so try to give that, kind of student voice some merit as well, without undoing all the work to put the schools back in balance. So try to find what we thought was a fair trade-off, even though in some ways those can become competing interests. If you go too far with one, well, you're back out of balance again. And so really trying to get all that to coordinate and, again, listen to a lot of ideas and just, this won't be perfect. There are trade-offs in that, but in order, the overarching goal was we need better, balance between the attendance areas of West and East, but yet also trying to recognize, that people have different interests and try to honor those as best we can.
And then after next year's kind of 1 year change in process, we would go back to 100 difference from 150. We would keep that same January 31st deadline in there for kind of initial consideration, and transportation between the two middle schools would not be provided anymore. So going back to the slide with the recommendation, and then I'll stop for questions. We're suggesting 106 as the best choice, and do that inter-district transfer plan as presented here. Okay?
And when you say that plan, you're including the shuttle as part of that plan?
Correct.
For year one.
For 1 year.
Yep.
So I think I agree with 106. That was my thought coming into this, but I do want the public to know, and anybody that may be watching this, that the board did get all the email communication forwarded to us of people that had questions, concerns, for or against a certain scenario, questions that they had, that we did see everything, we did hear them at the public forums that we had, at the conferences where we had tables. There were a lot of questions. I think, to me, the biggest question that came up outside of the transfer was why that area by Sun Path did that jet out? Why can't we just go down Marshall? And that was answered at our last board meeting, where we ran the scenario and the numbers from a demographic standpoint with our ratios that we were trying to balance didn't work. So I just want to be very clear that as a board, we did hear the community and took action on their feedback, just like Mike said. And I guess from a recommendation standpoint, I would have to agree personally that I think 106 is probably the best option that we have to balance them. Doing nothing is not an option. So.
Yeah, I agree with Christie, 106 is the best option for us. I mean, I understand there's gonna be pain points regardless of what we do, but doing nothing is gonna cause, I think, the deepest pain. Moreover, just because West is so far beyond its capacity that, it's gonna be a challenge getting kids in an environment where they can learn.
Other comments?
106 was also my preference, and when I'm looking at the numbers, I'm really looking at the free and reduced lunch special ed, and it is so balanced.
Right.
I mean, how can you, 1%? So that for me was my deciding factor, that 106 is the right way to go.
Yeah, and this was some fantastic work spearheaded by Dave. I know you did a lot of the heavy lifting yourself, but I know others were involved. But like you're saying, to get to 1%, it's really hard to get better than that.
Well, 0.
Yeah.
Work on that,
Should have
Dave?
jumped.
Yeah, Bill.
You should have
Is
Jeff
Bill
work
still
on
here?
that.
Gotta move that point too.
And thank you so much, Dave, for working and reworking these boundaries to give us the answers that we needed. So
Yeah, the great thing is we had two great scenarios,
Yeah.
106, 107, they were both great options. I do believe, and I have since the beginning, that 106 was the better of the two really good options.
So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we move forward with 106.
I'll second.
And the what do you call it, the inter-district transfer process.
We have a motion, we have a second, we have a
Second.
call. Dave, let me chime in simply to say that what's been said, I think, was fantastic. Very eloquent, Christie, your summation, how people, we listened and we've responded to it. Nice comment by Paul, too, that it's not going to be easy for folks that this involves change. We know that.
There is.
It isn't. And sometimes we have to make decisions that are tough, and this is a tough decision, but it's the right decision to do something. Doing nothing is not an option. So I think I believe we have vetted this till the cows come home, and you are to be commended, Dave, and all that have touched this. Sarah, you've done a lot of work behind the scenes too. I really think we've taken a situation that is problematic and would only get worse over time, and we've got a very good solution. Is it perfect? There's probably no such thing, but we've got a very good solution. And thank you, Dave, and all that have done.
And one other thank you I'd like to throw out there is to all of the parents who showed up or made comments or contacted us. Anytime we can hear from our community before we make a decision is such a blessing, and so that is very appreciated.
And I'll say, we really did this as a teamwork with the community as well. And when, I think the majority of you were at both public meetings and responded at conference tables and hearing from people directly, and you put yourselves out there, and that was kind of nice, actually. It was nice to have us all together working on that. So it is a hard thing, and it just works better when we're all doing this as a team, so thank you as well.
A couple of things I just thought of. One was some of the feedback at the conferences that I received, and I know some of you that were at some of the meetings heard the parents say, "We understand. You have to do something."
Right.
And so that was reassuring to me that the parents understood that this was real and that we were going to do everything that we could to try to get this balance the best that we could, so the kids have some opportunities that maybe they may not have in their current school because there's so many kids. It's going to be more comfortable for the kids, I think. And the other thing I just thought of, I know one of the big questions that I had some of the conferences, how are you gonna communicate about the intertransfer and where will they get the forms and that sort of thing? So have you thought about how we were gonna communicate that to everyone?
We have a meeting, we've thought about that, and Ashley and Crystal, and the reason, people know that it's an issue, they live in it, but also they did a good job getting that out there.
Mhm.
So we have had preliminary talks, we're gonna nail down exactly, how something's gonna go out from, obviously, the board brief, and then our principals, we're crafting something that'll go to, from each elementary principal and our middle school principals out to the students in their buildings as well here, hopefully by Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon is when we're planning on doing that. And then we will do ongoing communication, I think, especially with a deadline in there, and that's a new deal for us. And so we will, like you saw, the list of all the communications that were done that we presented here, that we will plan to communicate that often and regularly and make sure. And I'm sure that Maddie's gonna put this at the front page. We'll have this inter-district transfer form available. No, thank you.
And put Dave's number.
Yeah, there you go. Can we get Dave by telling Dave next to it?
Yeah.
So no, we don't, the details I don't have, but yes, we know, with a deadline in there, and it's fairly tight, we have about 6 weeks. We want to get it out there consistently, regularly, make sure somebody's not caught up in that. And Sarah has done a really nice job. We've been working on what that form is going to look like, because it's a complicated set of things to think through at this point. If you're an 8th grader, if you're a 7th grader or a 6th grader, it might look a little different.
And you may want to, I don't know, put in the communications, I don't know if it's the board brief or what, but a date as to when that form would be available, because I think the phone's gonna ring off the hook as soon as.
It will be available I'm hoping Wednesday morning is what.
It's close.
By the end of the week.
Yeah. Yes, we'll be ready to go with that.
You should be able to have a link on the website. Good.
All right, I think we have a motion on the table.
We do.
We had some additional discussion, but that's fine. So it sounds like we feel like we've got enough information to make a significant decision like this. All right. Motion is to approve scenario 106 going into next school year with the deadline talked about with the transfer plan. That's what's on the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you again, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dave. You and your team did good work on that one.
All right, let's keep the train going. Item 9.7, another action item. I think this one's fairly straightforward. Mike, you want to take it, but it's about something coming down from the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah, it's, I think last year was the first year we had to do this. We have no plans to hold our own election next year, but as a matter of practice, there was a new law passed that said, if you're going to, you have to pass this resolution prior to the end of the preceding year. So just as a matter of practice, we will have this on every December agenda, as long as the law's in place. And so it's a resolution. If you were to hold an election, and again, we have zero plans as a school district to hold our own election, but if you were, the only way you could do a combined polling place and make that election more efficient is to have passed this resolution in the preceding year. So we're doing this just on the 1 in 10 million chance that, something might happen, but it just as a matter of good practice, it's suggested by the Minnesota School Board Association. Yep, do this every year, just in case, get in the habit of doing that, and especially so that some year down the line, when you actually are planning to do it, you don't forget about it, so.
So spoiler alert, every December we'll be having this.
That's the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Questions for Mike? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Make a motion that we approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Judy? Okay.
And I believe we have to do a roll call with this as well, Sarah?
I'd be happy to.
I believe we do.
I'd be happy to. Yes, that's why we moved it down.
Yes.
You're so right. Aldrich,
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
McKeon.
Yes.
Peterson.
Yes.
Tomzig.
Yes.
Tucker.
Yes.
And Bowerman.
Yes, ma'am. Motion passes.
That was contentious.
It was.
All right, let's move on to item 9.8. And for this item, consistent with my prior practice, I'm actually going to relinquish the chair to Vice Chair Judy Tomzig, and I will just step out into the audience. So
Yeah, you're gonna step out of the audience, not in the hallway.
I may actually use the restroom, so if that's okay. I will be back.
Well, we are going to discuss the applications that we received to fill Reggie's place. And, excuse me, before we get started, I do want to say that thank you to the members of our community who took the time and effort and the risk of putting yourself out there. We had 7 applicants, and it's going to be hard to choose from the 7 applicants, but that's a good predicament to have. We have a lot of good candidates to choose from, and I say thank you very much to those who have put it out here. Matt, are you in charge of this?
I can speak to it. I wouldn't say I'm in charge of it, but
I'm not sure exactly how we need to move forward.
yeah, I can kind of speak to it, and Mike can absolutely as well. So we've done a scoring. Each one of us, the 6 of us, read through all 7 candidates' applications. We did not know the people's names. We don't know who they are, so it was just based on the strength of the application. In order to narrow it down so we don't have 7 candidates to interview next week, we had a scoring system that each one of us had equal weight in a vote, and we scored using a 1-3-5 scoring so you can get some differentiation. And we had some pretty good scores, right? And we had, it looks like in my mind, we have a top 3 who all scored very well, an average of 3 or higher, some close to 5. So, you know, it seemed like we have a kind of a differentiation. We have a 3 kind of above the line and 4 who, you know, did well but didn't rank as high at the end of the day. So we had initially talked about, do we want to have discussion tonight to narrow 3 to 2, so we would interview 2 next week, or one idea would be that we bring 3 candidates forward next week and get to interview them, let the public see them, get a lot more information about them in the ensuing week, and by actually having a conversation with them, so we could make a more informed decision than trying to cut 3 to 2 tonight based on a 3-page application. So I guess that's the first question is, would we be comfortable with moving forward with 3, or do we feel strongly that 2 is the right one?
I'm comfortable with going with the 3.
Okay.
You know, it's pretty clear, you know, the ones that scored a 20 or above really separated themselves.
I agree with that.
I think each one of those 3 could really have the potential to add value to the board.
Mhm. Yeah, just going through some strengths of the 3. Well, first of all, does anyone disagree that we want to move forward with 3?
I have no issue with that.
Okay with that?
It seems like with how the scoring turned out, that 3, since 2 and 3 were pretty close.
Yeah.
That I think it would be good to interview the 3.
Okay. It makes it a little bit harder on the back end, right? When picking one of 2 is easier than picking one of 3, but we can deal with that. And I think in my mind, the benefit of getting to see them and talk with them really helps make the decision easier.
Now, my other question here is, now, once their names are revealed, are we gonna know which application number they were?
Yes, we will. Now, that leads me to another question of, typically when we've interviewed people or we've used a scoring system, we haven't gone public with the names of those who do not move forward as finalists. That's been past practice. I know, Mike, you've seen some more things too, right? Where that's a decision for us, though. I mean, one school of thought would be, we want to thank all 7 publicly for taking the risk, taking the leap. But also, if you disclose that somebody applied and wasn't selected, maybe they'd prefer not to be. So I guess I err on the side of wanting to be most kind to the people who applied, but what does that look like?
Well, I think that by thanking them for putting their name out there, if they don't have an interview, they know.
Yeah,
And
they've heard us say.
Yeah.
We appreciate that and understand the challenge that they've risen to.
We can just put out I guess, I hate to use the term generic, but a
Generic,
generic
yeah.
thank you to everybody that applied, that put themselves out there, that want to be involved in the community.
Okay, so we will only announce the 3 finalists by name publicly.
I think that makes the most sense,
Okay.
yes.
So the next procedural question, we do have a special board meeting next Monday for the interviews. We obviously can't make a formal decision then, but we also could have some substantive discussion at the end of that. I don't believe somebody could be seated until, was it mid-February, early February?
I think it's 30 days.
Yeah, there's a 30-day waiting
After.
period from the
Business.
acceptance of that, which would be, and you can't accept the applicant until, in this case, after December 31st. So it'd be at the January 6th meeting, you could accept that, the applicant after the interviews who you've selected, and then they actually have a 30-day waiting period before they could be seated on the board. And I believe it's February 9th, we have a work session where that could be an action item.
And we
I think
believe
it's the date.
there's the Minnesota School Board Association Convention that's downtown Minneapolis. January 12th, 15th?
15th through
17th.
15, 16,
So,
17?
which is a fantastic learning experience.
And they
so,
could come to the retreat on the 11th.
correct. That's right. They
Public
couldn't-
meeting.
yeah,
Right.
And it's not and there can't be any voting taken, so.
Right.
So do we, we could either try and select one on the first, not formally name them until, if we want to do that night next Monday, or do we want to let it breathe and do the selection on the 6th?
So my question about that is, if after the interviews next Monday night, we have discussion and there's a clear person that comes out of it, can we announce who that is? Or do we have to wait until the January 6th meeting?
It's a great question. My understanding would be it's an open meeting, it's a regular meeting. You could take action on the 16th. You couldn't formally, it would be something of the nature that this is the candidate we're going to recommend be approved at the board meeting on January 6th.
So we can't formally make a decision till then.
No, because technically, Reggie is in the role through December 31st.
Right.
Is the date, and it has to be at meeting after.
Yeah, and I think maybe that waiting period just, can give each of us a chance to just kind of consider everything and make sure that we're making the right decision too.
And that's the benefit. We get time to let it breathe. We get time to get feedback from other members of the public who maybe, attend the interviews or watch them online. That's the benefit. The flip side, you've got 3 people twisting for 3 or 4 weeks over the holidays, and the ask would be if we name them on January 6th, that maybe they'd take a couple days of PTO the next week, so it.
If we did come up with the name on the 6th, even though we can't approve it fully, then I think that would put that person in line to look at their calendar and plug in some of those things that we hope they would be able to attend, like the convention and things like that.
Yeah, we could do that tonight when we name the 3, that, hey, please hold these dates.
Did we communicate a calendar with the application of kind of upcoming events, or not yet?
Not the events that they're speaking of in January.
Okay. More the
Correct.
application.
But the interview would be.
Right, the process piece, yes,
Yeah.
but not the piece
But we
that you
could certainly do that
Oh, yeah.
for, assuming there's 3 finalists, and just kind of save the date type thing,
Oh, yeah.
and we get how that works.
Okay, so do we have a consensus on whether we want to interview and decide next week, or do we want to interview next week and then decide at the organizational meeting in January?
I'm a little torn with the opportunity to have time to ponder.
Yeah.
I mean, last time, there was nothing really to ponder. We had Judy.
One person.
Right.
Yes.
So I kind of like that opportunity to ponder, especially with having 3 versus 2, and I wouldn't want to be rushed to make a decision.
I would prefer to wait. 'Cause I'd like to take the time after the interviews, maybe even rewatch them. They are gonna
Right.
be, and just to see if there's something I miss, just so that we make the best informed decision.
Yeah, well,
Because
I think most
this
of-
is a very important decision. We should not just be rushing through it. It's,
I mean, there's a possibility there's a clear person, but at the same time, having that opportunity to reflect on it, I think is important or valuable.
And to hear from the public as well. So
Right.
that we as elected officials can hear from the public if somebody feels strongly one way or another. So are we at consensus that we will not make formal appointments on this until January 6th?
That sounds good.
I agree with
And I
that.
wish we could let all 3 of them know what's going on.
Yes, so-
The dates, what's happening.
Yes. And then the last thing is that we've had some interview questions that we've used in the past. I can update those and Sarah can send them out for feedback so that we have, we want to ask the same questions of every candidate.
Right.
So that we're standard. So that'll be prepped this week. And if you have feedback, please relay that to Sarah. And then she can tweak and edit the document as needed. So with that being said, the 3 candidates, why don't I just kind of walk through their,
We have to make
Or
a
am
motion.
I ready to make ask for a
Again, we
motion?
need to, I think so.
Okay. At this point, we're looking for a motion that we will select the top 3 rated
Applicants.
candidates, and that we will also interview them on the 16th, but we won't make a decision on that day.
So moved.
Second.
All right? Discussion?
We've hammered
I think we have to, but is there any more?
Nope.
In that case, I'm not sure how to say this.
All those in favor?
Oh, just that? No, don't I have to say all those in favor of the 3 top candidates being interviewed on the 16th and not selecting a candidate until the first meeting in January? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, so I'll announce the applicants by number with just a couple bullets about their strengths, and then once I've announced all 3, do you want to go one at a time and give us the name afterwards?
However you'd like me to do it. I'm ready for whatever you want to do.
Looking at the acting chair for guidance.
Are you looking to do this right now?
I think we need their names right now, don't we?
Yeah.
As part of.
That was the idea.
I don't think we need to know we should all know what their strengths, what they bring. Each of us probably has a different perspective of that.
True, yeah, so we can just announce the 3 names if
I
that's
just
what
will
we
say
want.
that, applicant, whatever, and then the names
And we're just revealing the top 3, correct?
Correct.
And then Sarah, will you reach out to them to make sure that they are still interested in, or who will make that
Yeah.
call, or?
We've done that before that way. I'd be happy to.
Sarah, can you also email us the names as well?
Sure.
Thank you.
And we're going to do the interviews here.
But aren't we going to find the
think
names
so.
now?
Yes.
It'll be part of the public record?
Yes.
For the top 3.
Top 3.
So number 7, number 3, and number 4 were the top 3 scores.
Okay. Number 3 is Jeffrey Smith. Number 4 is Tamra Tyler, Tyler being the last name. And number 7 is Timothy Brophy.
How do you spell the last name?
Sure. Let me go, Tamra is Tamra. That's the number 4, application number 4. Tim Brophy is B like boy, R-O-P like Paul, H-Y.
I don't know that we need to discuss any
Yeah,
of their
no.
top points.
We'll see more.
We sort of did that when we evaluated and filled out the rubric.
Yep.
And we'll get to have a more enlightened understanding of their strengths.
Looking forward to the interviews.
I hope
Yeah.
they can all make it, and hope that we have 3 great candidates as they look on paper.
They do, they look very good. And again, thank you to all 7 candidates who filled out the form, and I would suggest to those people, as well as to other people interested in getting involved in the community. There will be a school board election coming up at some future time, and to consider that you would want to be involved in that.
Also, thank you to you, Sarah, for redacting and getting us more time.
Yes.
No problem.
Yet again. All right, at that point.
Are you willing to turn the gavel back over to
One last time?
the guy in the back of the room there?
Make sure you're clear, we've got a lot of ex-board members here, we don't want anybody coming back up.
And you have to go over the dates, I didn't cover that.
All right. Oh, yeah. Oh, we're at round table. All right. Angela, we'll go that way. Yeah. We'll go this way. My wife, my mom, what?
Wait, these are computer glasses. I was just trying to get a
Okay,
good look
all
at you.
right. Yes.
I don't have anything to report, but I do want to say how much I will miss working with you and how much of a pleasure it has been to serve with the most brilliant person I know. Because you have a lot of information, Sam, and you're really good at retaining information. So it has been a joy. We've been through a lot, and thank you for helping me get through the good times and the bad times. And I will miss you.
Great, I gotta follow that.
Maybe we should skip this part.
Yeah, no.
You just asked for it.
Very, very similar sentiments. I first met you in 2010 on a facilities task force. That seems to be a trend. And it's been an honor and privilege to work with you, and I'm a big fan of historical quotes, and I picked out the perfect one, and then I realized that the man himself used it when other board members were retiring. It's the Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena quote. So I won't bore everybody by reading that again, but it's like I said, it's been an honor. You've taught me a lot. You've especially the importance of red lines and looking at every version of a document. Liberal use of the word delta, and that's probably the last time I'll use the word liberal in a
careful
description. But healthy use of the word delta and longitudinal and other IQ words that I've enjoyed getting to learn and working with you. So we wish you the best. And whoever is selected next week has some big shoes to fill. Thank you.
How about some more business, Paul?
Well, first and foremost, I would again like to extend my appreciation to you, Reggie, for your years of community service and also your mentorship. When you were willing to meet with all the candidates that were running in 2018. I know our meeting, from my perspective, was very enlightening and very productive. You kind of clarified a lot of things that I wasn't too clear on at the time. And again, I really appreciate that. And we're gonna miss you. And also on just an announcement, from an announcement standpoint, if there's anybody out there that is interested in joining the Community Education Advisory Board, we are screaming for help. So please feel free to reach out to Bob and let's get involved.
It's a good community. Yeah. Does a lot of good things. Thanks, Paul. Sarah. I want you to try to lead.
To try to find the words has been tough. And coming off of some of the other things that have been said, the ultimate teacher, not only did I learn a new vocabulary word every time I'm with you, I looked for something that spoke to me and spoke to me about you. And so I found a quote, and I'm going to try to read it. It's an Ernest Hemingway quote. Before you act, listen. Before you react, think. Before you spend, earn. Before you criticize, wait.
Before you pray, forgive. Before you quit, try. And that's Reggie.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Bob, working our way around the room here.
Start with me.
Yeah.
It's been great working with you. And, you know, because for you. Because as employees in the district, we report to the school board. It's been great, and thank you for supporting community education and everything that we do, and wish you well, and I don't know if you pronounce it Missouri or Missouri.
Happy Missouri.
But best of luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who do we normally thank? Keith?
I guess. Hey, it's been a pleasure working with you. I mean, my short time here, professionalism has been exhibited by all board members, but you are outstanding in every way. So it's been a pleasure working with you, for you. So good luck, and Q barbecue.
Yes. Thank you. On the list. Jeff?
Yeah, it's been great working with you. Appreciate the support. We've changed some programming and done some things that really needed your leadership. I do recall the first board finance meeting. I think I was here for, I think it was my third day on the job. And I go into the board finance meeting and Reggie's, what's that fund balance gonna be?
He's been saying it every meeting since.
Well, it's been great. Thanks.
Nancy, how about some business?
Just tomorrow, we are hosting our delegation from the Department of Defense. We're building their high schools in Europe, and one person is from DC, but the others are all from military bases in Europe, and going to spend the next day with them. And just shows Reggie how important the board is again when we went through some tough times. So you guys held with us, and some great things our kids are doing, our staff and others too are being recognized by others. So it's a good feeling.
Is it just the one day, or is it multiple days, or?
They're with us for a day and a half,
Okay.
and they were interested both in the CAPS program as well as the high school academy model. And then they're actually, and I hope they're prepared for this, but they're actually traveling up to Alexandria too to visit with those folks that we like to partner with too, because they have a wall-to-wall academy model. So
Good.
they're going to spend a little bit of time with Julie, Chris, and Chad and that group as well.
Great. I'm sure we can positively influence what they're going to do.
Whether aside.
Yeah, right. Well, let's get December.
Yeah, I should have also mentioned, for Zach, we'll be finishing up the registration guide, and that will be emailed to you right before winter break, and I'm sure Reggie can't wait to read it one last time. So
Can you send in the red ones?
Yeah. So you'll get that as an email. I should have mentioned that in the presentation.
Thanks, Nancy. Dave?
My favorite word, and I'm still not confident I can use it in a sentence, because I thought it was shampoo. Nexus. But I remember when I was a principal at Sweeney, and I came in, we used to have to come and give presentations once a year, and get to. I think I put everybody to sleep except Reggie. Charts and grass. And you can count on Reggie. If you sense something or you need critical feedback or whatever, he is going to do it. And not only does he keep it, he consumes such a huge volume of information, and just really appreciate that, and just consistent high performance. And somebody said this, but there were times for a number of you where in my mind, the easier thing would have been to go, and you stayed. And I think I really respect that. I appreciate all you've done, and you will be. I'll miss you personally, and I know this organization is going to miss you. So thank you. You've given a lot.
Thank you very much. Christy?
Well, Reggie and I know each other a little bit differently than school board. It was, Reggie and I served on the Shakopee Education Endowment Foundation for a few years, and that's kind of how I got involved in school activities. Reggie actually got me involved at one point. I had contacted him about running for school board, and at the last minute I decided not to. And I think somebody maybe was watching over me on that year, but but he encouraged me to get involved and gave me the told me to come to a CEF meeting, and I did, and it just goes to show how much Reggie really cared about the students in this district, and all the wonderful things that CEF does in the classroom for teachers and the students, and your support of that organization, not just from a voluntary standpoint, is just tremendous. So thank you for everything that you've done for them. Thank you for everything you've done for this district, on the board. Been through some tough times, but we're heading in the right direction, and a lot of that is your wisdom and thoughts and leadership. And I appreciate everything that you've done for me personally. You've got a wealth of information that is inside of you, and I wish I could have an ounce of it, because there's just so much. And yes, that person that we appoint will have big shoes to fill. So thank you for everything.
Thank you.
On the business side of it, over the weekend, I attended the delegate assembly for MSBA, and Matt asked me to talk about the 28 legislative proposals, so I brought the binder tonight, so I hope you don't mind that we just
Number one.
go through.
Let's go.
Just kidding. There were 123 school board members from across the state of Minnesota that were there, which is one of the all-time high numbers for participation. Great discussion. There were some great debates, and the number, 23 of the 28 proposed pieces of legislation for the 2020 session was passed, and a majority of it was passed in an overwhelming support. So at another time, I can kind of talk through some of the big topics of what the school board across the state of Minnesota is encouraging MSBA to lobby for 2020. So it was interesting. I'm glad I did it. I learned a lot. I met a lot of people. Have a great region, Region 17. So
Thank you for representing us.
It's
awesome.
it's a good learning experience.
Appreciate that.
And then Professor Schultz from Hamlin spoke for 90 minutes on Friday night, and that was very interesting information. And I mean, he was just fabulous to listen to. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you. Joe?
Two things, just as Paul said, when I decided to run, you met with me, and that really stuck out. And I'm planning on doing that for everybody who's going to run, if anybody new's going to run in 2020, 2022, whenever it is, because I think that just, it was a great handshake, you know, welcome, win or lose, finding out about it. So that was great. And what we're all going to miss is just the depth of your questions that you come up with. And I really hope that we've all learned something, that so when you're gone, we're going to be able to ask those questions that you've been asking to everybody that has sat up there, because it's the questions you ask, you're just so prepared, and it's just been wonderful. It's been wonderful to have a year to be able to listen to that. Good luck in Missouri, and hopefully, you know, the Chiefs can
Well, I owe Reggie an apology. True? Because I told him he had to stay for this. Not that he does what I say, but I told him that when we all get together and we talk about the work that we do, it shows how we value the work that we do. And I think that is true, and I think that is great you stayed for that reason. But we also value you individually, and that was an important reason for you to be here. The institutional knowledge that we're going to lose it's irreplaceable. We'll muddle through, I'm sure, but just being on the conference call with you every couple of weeks, I've learned a lot from that about how to organize an agenda and what questions to ask, the questions. He's great with questions, and they're so important. So thank you, and to you and to your wife, because I've learned this last year and a half that more than one person in the family makes a sacrifice when you decide to be part of a school board. So thank you. We all appreciate you so much. We're going to miss you a lot.
Thank you very much. Almost on a blast, so.
Are you going somewhere?
Trying.
It's only 10
Time to filibuster.
No. I would just echo the sentiments, and I think for me, it's, I just appreciate how much you give of yourself on behalf of our students and our entire school district and community, and I'm very, very appreciative of that. I think people see kind of the public stuff, the meetings. I think that is definitely the tip of the iceberg, what Reggie gets done, behind the scenes and prepping for the meetings. And like Dave said, I have zero doubt that you read everything that comes out, and that's incredible, and ask great questions. And I know for me as a superintendent and as a leader, that's been incredibly helpful. You've helped me to improve and get better, and so thank you. We are going to miss you. I would just change one thing. I would kind of challenge us as a group. I don't think it's the new person that has to fill the shoes. It's everybody at this table. We've all got to raise our game a little bit, and it's not fair to put that task into one person. But thank you. I wish you nothing but the best. And if the Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl and the Vikings aren't there, then go ahead and win that too.
Yeah, they already did that to us once.
Yeah.
I have a colleague in the audience who is far more eloquent than I could ever attempt to be at this time last year. But I will simply say that I'm an imperfect person. I'm an imperfect board member. But I tried. And, we had bumps along the way, that's for sure. But I think we did accomplish a lot of good things. In fact, I know we did. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of where Shakopee Public Schools are at. I'm proud to have been a very small part of that. And it started back in 2008 when I was appointed to the board, just like you're going to do soon. And it's been a great experience. I've valued it. I've enjoyed it. And like I said, I think maybe in some small way I've contributed. But it's in good hands. And that means you guys on the board. It means the staff, the teachers. That's where it happens. It happens in the classroom, but there's a lot of support that enables that. And it's in good shape. And I'm going to watch from afar. I am going to keep a pulse on things. And I'm just confident on where it's going. And it's an example, Nancy said, what we're doing with the DOD. They picked us out to look at this model to implement perhaps overseas. What a phenomenal endorsement that is, just to check us out. And that's the kind of thing we're doing here at Shakopee. And I think our kids, you talked about the kids' comments, that's what it's all about. So I simply say thank you for the opportunity to serve. Thank you for the trust that's been placed in me to serve for a couple of terms, 3 terms. I'll miss it, but it's been a great run. So thank you very much. Thank you.
So our YouTube viewership of board meetings is going to go from like 7 to 8 now?
I might sneak back. I see a couple more.
Text message. What were you thinking when you said that?
Here's the question you got.
During the meeting, we're going to all have our phones. What does Reggie say?
All right, we're wrapping this up. So we've got some visitors, recognition of any visitors who care to speak to the board tonight on any of the topics we've covered. Okay, we will move along to upcoming meetings and events. We've only got a few because you got to approve the agenda or the calendar for the full year. But we do have the December 16th meeting, which is going to be important. It sounds like you're going to have personnel ahead of that. Okay, so that's still happening. Special school board meeting on the 16th for the interviews you talked about tonight. Reorg on the 6th. Winter retreat the 11th. I think it's great that you're going to be in a position to let candidates know
Mhm.
about the MSBA conference and then meeting on the 27th. All right, with that,
Sounds good.
I can't make my own motion,
I'll make a
so I
motion
will
that we
say,
adjourn this last meeting with Reggie. 20.
Holding the gavel.
That's right, holding the gavel.
thank you.
Reluctantly seconded.
I'll second.
I heard Judy first.
Okay.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we are adjourned.
It wasn't even that late.